Hi, thanks for joining a new video. Today we're reviewing the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold7. Let's begin. This device represents Samsung's latest foldable, which has impressively matured, significantly bridging the gap between a foldable and a traditional device in terms of form factor. However, the price remains quite high. In Mexico, the most basic configuration is set at 45,999 pesos, which translates to approximately $2,465. Although remember that the prices here are not the same as there, and as more storage you want, the price will rise in a way that will be more expensive. The cost of this device isn't the most shocking, though it's clearly a very pricey gadget, much like all horizontal folding devices of this kind. It competes with offerings from Oppo, Huawei, and Honor, so its price is comparable. It's not more expensive than its rivals. However, what's fascinating about Samsung is that during the pre-sale period, they provide quite appealing promotions, making it an intriguing option. You can also purchase it from various distributors, including both online platforms and physical retail stores. This availability makes it simpler to find more appealing promotions, which is not always the case with other manufacturers. Watch the prices of this device closely as they can vary significantly. Now, let's explore it point by point. Let's discuss the design, which has evolved significantly from the last generation. The front design offers excellent protection against falls and scratches, which is great. The bezels on this device have slightly straightened corners, and the bezels themselves are reduced. However, they're not reduced to the extreme level seen in more traditional format devices. I believe there is still a significant range for improvement in this area. Nonetheless, it does have the appearance of a modern device. In fact, it's protected with Gorilla Glass Ceramic 2, which provides an excellent level of protection against both drops and scratches, which is certainly a positive feature. On the right side, we will discover the aluminum frames. In this instance, it features a new type of aluminum that Samsung refers to as Armor Aluminum Advanced, 10% more resistant than the previous generation, which is a completely necessary evolution. This is due to the fact that it now boasts a much thinner profile, making it crucial to have greater rigidity in a device that is thinner. Positioned on the right side, you will find the volume buttons as well as the on-off button. This button also serves as a fingerprint reader. On the top, we will discover two microphones, an audio output, and also the tray for inserting the SIM card. It's interesting because this tray is not usually located at the top, making it a unique detail. By the way, this tray is designed to hold two SIM cards, which is certainly a valuable feature, particularly for those who utilize two separate lines, one for personal use and another for work purposes. Clearly, you can't insert a micro SD card. The left side is entirely clean, with only the brand's logo visible. This side view helps us understand just how slim the device is. It measures 8.9 millimeters in thickness, which is essentially what we see in other high-end devices of a traditional design. This is where you can observe a very significant difference. Regarding thickness, we found the Galaxy Z Fold6 to be 12.1 millimeters. And the evolution has been brutal, and with this device becomes much more comfortable because it is not perceived as if you are using a folding, it is perceived as if you are using a traditional format. At the bottom we find again audio output, two microphones, and the USB-C port. In fact, Samsung has practically taken the thickness to the limit with respect to the USB-C port, because when the device is deployed, we find a thickness of just 4.2 millimeters. It's an incredibly slim device. Additionally, its weight is 215 grams. There's a significant evolution compared to the previous generation, which weighed 239 grams. The differences are quite remarkable. In this version, it also introduces a new hinge called the Armor Flex hinge. This hinge features an enhanced drop-shaped design that helps prevent excessive pressure on the screen's fold area, while also strengthening durability by evenly distributing the pressure. It's an exceptionally well-crafted hinge, exhibiting remarkable design and possessing excellent rigidity as well. Capable of adjusting to various angles, it doesn't feel like a loose hinge or anything similar, and it is certainly creates the experience extremely comfortable. The hinge practically has no visible gaps. However, if you examine it closely, you might notice some small light inlets. These suggest that there are indeed minimal gaps present. This is particularly true in the specific area of the screen's fall. Here, the hinge attempts to subtly sink the screen to minimize tension. That's why you might observe that it generates these small gaps. Tiny gap. However, as I mentioned, this has resulted in the fold area of the screen being significantly less noticeable compared to previous generations. Therefore, the device appears quite modern in these aspects. And when it is at last unfolded, we once again notice the bezels. They are not as thin as those found on traditional format devices, yet they still provide a sufficiently good display area. It's important to mention that this generation does not feature a camera under the screen, which I personally appreciated. The screen would be on top to avoid any interruption in the display. This generation, Samsung has prioritized image quality, as it is a camera that has undergone significant evolution, which we will explore shortly. However, regarding design, there is an important distinction to note. Ultimately, the device's back showcases a minimalist design with a blue shade color. Additionally, it is offered in silver, black, and a mint color edition, which is exclusively available at the Samsung store. Within any of the available options, we encounter a satin finish that provides just a slight hint of gloss, yet it doesn't reflect any image. The camera module, housed within this compact capsule, noticeably protrudes from the device's body to sustain an ultra-slim profile. This design choice moves away from the previous ring design that wasn't very popular with Samsung users, resulting in a much cleaner and refined appearance. This camera module capsule is somewhat larger compared to the previous generation. However, this added relief results in the phone becoming even more unstable when placed on a table, whether it's in a play state or simply lying on a flat surface, as well as when it's in the deployed state. This generation's cases are significantly thinner. So even with the case on, it's still going to have this instability when placed on a flat surface. This is unlike most other foldables out there, which usually have a circular centered camera module that tends to be a bit more stable. This back is safeguarded with Gorilla Glass Victus 2, ensuring a solid level of drop resistance. Additionally, the device is overall IPE protected against water, so even if you happen to drop it in the water, nothing's going to happen to it, which is quite positive. Having a hinge present, it is amazing that it has this level of resistance, although you have to be careful with fine dust, sand, or similar elements because it does not have total dust resistance, although with a basic level wherever you want to see it. The design that Samsung has achieved in this device has been something very important. Definitely that is its strongest point, because it is a super thin foldable, super light, and despite this it is larger than the last generation, as it now adopts a proportion of the same size as the previous generation. A bit more expansive, which will once more enable us to utilize the device in a manner that closely resembles the experience we have with traditional format devices. For instance, it includes a broader keyboard, addressing one of the major criticisms that have been directed at Samsung's foldables up to this point. Therefore, the design appears significantly more polished and is undoubtedly quite impressive. Let's discuss in more detail the external display, which now measures 6.5 inches. This is an increase compared to the previous generation. Its aspect ratio has also changed, now being 21:9, offering a more conventional format, unlike the narrower formats we saw in past generations, such as the 22.1:9 ratio on the Galaxy Z Fold7, which had a different proportion. Furthermore, the resolution has been updated, now reaching 1080 by 2520 pixels, providing us with full HD quality. The screen is excellent, providing us with 422 pixels per inch, which means the level of detail is superb. All texts, even those in very small fonts, appear extremely sharp, leaving nothing to be desired in this aspect. Additionally, it features a dynamic AMOLED 2 display with Samsung's top-notch technology. The colors are very precise and vibrant. In fact, you will find 2 color modes available for selection, allowing you to choose between vivid colors or less saturated ones, depending on your preference. If you opt for vivid colors, this display offers a manual white balance setting and manual RGB calibration, allowing you as the user to customize the display's appearance to your liking. Additionally, it includes an intensity selector, enabling you to adjust the color saturation. It also features the adaptive color tone function, which attempts to match the environment's white color. Although it often doesn't get as warm in warm settings, it can be useful if you prefer automatic white balance. The screen really is very good, although we do not have specific information on the level of brightness it is able to achieve, but you can view it perfectly outdoors, and of course you will also be able to use the very high brightness when watching HDR content to make certain areas of the screen shine more intensely. In this case, for example, YouTube is compatible, Instagram is compatible, Netflix also, and many other streaming applications are also compatible with the HDR of this device. Just keep in mind that it lacks Dolby Vision. Honestly, for practical purposes, I don't think this is a significant disadvantage or anything like that, but it is an interesting detail. Instead, it supports HDR+, which I must say, for practical purposes, provides us with excellent image quality when watching this type of content. Actually, within the advanced features, To truly enjoy an even wider range of lights and shadows on the screen, it is essential to enable an option known as Super HDR. This feature significantly enhances the visual experience, offering a much higher range in terms of light and shadow representation. It genuinely functions exceptionally well, providing an improved viewing experience that is noticeably better. There is also the option to make videos slightly brighter wherever you choose to watch them. This external display is of excellent quality and also includes an extra dimming option. So, in addition to the already low brightness being quite comfortable, you as a user have the ability to further reduce the brightness, allowing for an even more comfortable viewing experience. All this, plus the dark mode and eye protection mode built into this device, along with an improved comfort switch that lets us slightly reduce contrast, making nighttime viewing much more pleasant. Upon unfolding the device, we discover an impressive 8-inch screen. To provide some context, the previous generation featured a screen of 7.6 inches, making the increase quite significant and noticeable. It features a larger screen that has a slightly more square aspect ratio. In this instance, the resolution is 2148 by 1968 pixels. This resolution is favorable, even though the pixel density is around 167 pixels per inch. While this density remains below the 400 pixels per inch mark, since it's a screen with more space, we usually tend to hold the cell phone a bit further away than we typically would when it's a typical cell phone. Nevertheless, even small text appears quite sharp, and you don't really notice a low detail screen or anything similar, despite it having a lower density than the external display. In this instance, similar to the external display, we encounter dynamic AMOLED 2X technology with identical color modes. Additionally, in this situation, the manufacturer does mention its increased brightness, which is 2600 nits. Additionally, both the external and internal displays come equipped with Vision Booster, a Samsung technology. When the screen is exposed to sunlight, it attempts to optimize the colors and contrast to enhance readability. It truly functions effectively, and the screen will definitely provide a pleasant viewing experience. Moreover, this internal display supports a wide range of HDR content that you can think of, except for Dolby Vision. Whereas a fun fact, for example, all the Netflix movies that are with Dolby Vision on this cell phone are going to play with HDR. Also, it won't be precisely same, but whether it will provide you with a sufficiently advanced viewing experience is another matter. And when it comes to minimum brightness, it's quite comfortable, especially with the switch for extra dimming. Finally, the refresh rate ranges from 1 to 120 Hz. This means, just like the external display, it can lower the refresh rate when showing static content to save battery, and when displaying dynamic content, it will increase up to 120%. In fact, the Galaxy Z Fold6 external display could only go down to 48 Hz, but this generation is already capable of going down to 1. So, if we see there yet another evolution over last generation, there is not much to improve here, but there is something important. The glass of the external display is Gorilla Glass Ceramic 2. As I had already anticipated it would be much better to see incorporated Gorilla armor that we see in the Galaxy S25 Ultra, for example. It's a superior display that reduces reflections and offers a more premium experience. In this particular case, even though it is the most expensive Samsung device, it is not seen as the most premium display that the manufacturer can offer. Let's discuss the sound quality because we have stereo speakers here, one located at the top and the other at the bottom. This setup provides symmetrical sound considering the speaker placement, though the bottom speaker appears to deliver slightly better quality. Overall, the sound is really quite good. Additionally, it provides a pleasing sense of the frequencies, with bass and treble that are well defined, and mid-frequencies that are not disturbing at all. The sound quality is excellent, featuring Dolby Atmos with presets to adjust surround sound and a 9-band equalizer for both speakers and headphones. The hardware in your speakers is enhanced by great software. We did a small test, but remember, it's not the same as hearing it live. The device has an optimized dialogue option useful for videos with low audio, or that suddenly increases or decreases its volume very intensely, because it also includes a feature known as volume normalization. Therefore, even if the content you're about to play isn't very well mastered or edited, the device can enhance it for you. These are features that are not typically found in other devices. In fact, in this instance, each of these settings, like equalization and other sections, can be customized for every individual application. Press and hold. To adjust the volume settings while using an application, click on the volume bar located in the control center. Make the necessary changes, and those specific settings will be saved for the application you are currently using. When you switch to a different application, the system will automatically apply different settings, which is quite convenient and useful. Additionally, it features Adapt Sound, a function designed to optimize the audio experience based on your age, ensuring the sound is tailored to your hearing needs. Lastly, when using headphones, the UHQ Optimizer is an option that will enhance the resolution of the content you listen to through your headphones. Samsung integrates the... You also have the ability to access independent sound control for applications, allowing you to maintain the audio from specific applications on your cell phone speakers. And the sound of other applications, send it to a Bluetooth speaker so you can have multi-sound on the same phone. And if you install the Sound Assistant application, which is developed by Samsung itself, you will also have access to individual volume control for each application, useful for when you have two applications playing at the same time. I really wish this feature was already built into the system, but unfortunately for now, you need to install an extra application to make it happen. However, I mention it because it is an application that is officially developed by Samsung. In fact, with this particular application, you can even force two or more applications to play simultaneously without being forced to stop the sound of any of these apps, as it usually happens on Android. Therefore, you have many more additional options available with this application. As you realize, the software is of the strongest points. Even in the sound section, like most devices, we will not find headphone jack, so we will depend on the USB-C port, or we can use wireless headphones. In this case, they have the aptX codec, LDAC and SSC. In this way, if it falls slightly short, we would really like to see aptX, adaptive, or LHDC included. The truth is, given that this is such an expensive device, we should definitely demand that it fully supports all codecs. However, in this situation, it does not mean it will play audio at a low quality. But if you're planning to purchase a headset, it's crucial to ensure that it includes LDAC, especially if you want to have the best possible experience in terms of sound resolution. Alternatively, you could buy a Samsung headset with LDAC for the best sound resolution experience. We'll have their codec. About the microphones, this device is full of them, with 5 total, 2 below, 2 above, and 1 hidden in the camera module, likely for noise reduction. Samsung uses these units to capture sound well. Let's hear a test.
Este es un audio grabado directamente con los micrófonos integrados del Galaxy Z Fold7.
It is evident that the quality will be excellent. Now, let us listen to how they perform in an extremely noisy environment. The overall experience has once again been nearly flawless. The device is excellent at adjusting its gain, ensuring that even in situations with significant noise, the sound is not captured with any distortions or issues like that. To wrap up this section, the cell phone features a vibration motor on the x-axis, providing you with outstanding haptic feedback. It even includes a setting to adjust the intensity of the vibration. And in fact, in this case, with different categories such as calls, notifications, interactions with the system, or multimedia controls, so the truth is that it works quite well. I really wish the operating system could be more optimized to provide enhanced haptic feedback when navigating through the system and moving the controls, among other things. The hardware is excellent, featuring a great vibration engine, yet the operating system doesn't fully utilize it in as many areas as it ideally should. This device has a 10-megapixel internal front camera with f2.2 aperture and has a fixed focus. As I anticipated, the screen is no longer positioned above the camera, which has improved the image quality. However, it sacrifices some of the visual experience when viewing the screen. But when we talk specifically about the camera, we notice a positive aspect with an even wider angle. On the other hand, the external front camera also features 10 megapixels with an f-aperture of 2.2 and a fixed focus. Therefore, they are quite similar, although the external front camera is not as wide as the internal front camera. Why? If you had forgotten, remember that by double pressing the on-off button, we can enter the camera. And with this same gesture, we can rotate between the rear camera and the front camera. Remember that this gesture works both with the screen off and with the screen on, so it is a very fast opening method. As I was saying, the external front camera is not as wide as the internal front camera. Therefore, if you're aiming to capture images with a substantial and impressive level of width, you can definitely take full advantage of this feature. But personally, you already know that I prefer to prioritize actually using this selfie mode. This allows me to take full advantage of the rear camera system. With this setup, you can even activate the ultra-wide camera to capture incredibly wide scenes. Additionally, you could also take selfies when the device is folded in this manner, and you can conveniently place it on a table. This is definitely a great benefit of owning a foldable device. In fact, it's also possible to use it with the internal front camera. Notice how the interface seamlessly adapts when you fold the device, allowing you to take full advantage of all its capabilities. Once again, you can set it up this way to capture a group picture. In this scenario, using the internal front camera, which offers much higher quality compared to the external front camera, and especially compared to the previous generation. But let's have a discussion about the software that accompanies the front camera. You'll notice that it provides an excellent capture speed. It feels quite responsive. Additionally, we can press and hold the shutter button to begin recording a short video, which will stop once we release the button. Alternatively, we can keep recording by sliding up. Furthermore, if we slide the shutter button downward, we can access a burst mode for the front camera, which is a feature that only a small number of devices offer. If you want to capture the perfect face with friends, use burst mode. You can enable motion photo capture at the top for a short video. Relive the moment with both photos and video. Also, try effects like boomerang for a revolution effect. Or you could also have a slow motion effect, which in reality looks quite cool and impressive. And finally, you have the option to disable the movements if you prefer to have the photo remain static. Additionally, you will find a button that allows you to load color filters. These filters can be previewed in real time, and you have the ability to adjust them using 5 different parameters. Moreover, you even have the capability to create and customize your own profile for a more personalized experience. Let's say that if you find a photo that you like the way it looks in terms of its colors, you can select it so that the device will try to. The device will mimic your coloring. You could observe in that picture in order to achieve a similar result. This final button will be smartly activated or deactivated. That's because when I enable the watermark on the photos through the settings, this letter A appears. If not, it stays hidden. Therefore, the interface remains quite clean. Actually, the other buttons are located right here, allowing us to access them quickly and efficiently. The timer, image ratio modification, and even beauty options with 4 parameters can be accessed, like skin smoothness, tone, jaw, and eye size. Here, it doesn't look too fake, though it clearly enhances and retouches the face. If you use these effects, a new button appears at the top to toggle it faster with a tap. Another button lets us choose the color rendition. It defaults to an interpretation. However, if you prefer, you have the option to choose warmer tones. Lastly, observe how we also offer the palm capture gesture, which functions exceptionally well. Additionally, we have the option to use the volume buttons for taking pictures. Within the settings, we can enable voice commands or even use a floating shutter, allowing us to position it for easier finger access. Regarding the external front camera, it's quite straightforward. It doesn't provide a highly advanced contrast. The image quality appears rather basic, provides 2 amplitude levels, and at the nearest level, you'll notice it crops the sensor, showing even less detail. It is clear that the front camera has a fixed focus, which is another downside because frankly, it's not very good. However, if you happen to be in lighting conditions that are a bit more favorable, then the outcome is likely to be positive. But keep in mind, this is a much simpler scenario where any smartphone would typically provide you with a decent photo. However, observe how in backlit situations, the preview isn't as optimized as it could be. There are still some areas that appear overexposed, but in this case, the final result after taking the photo does a better job at handling it. Blue balance and shadows. However, at times, it still appears somewhat overexposed and lacking in contrast, which, in this price range, definitely makes it seem like a pretty basic camera. At night, it functions as a camera that performs adequately, but for such an expensive device, we would expect it to capture more detail in low light conditions. For instance, in backlit nighttime situations, you'll notice it struggles significantly in brightly lit areas. I've even encountered mid-range devices with superior front-facing cameras. So, while it's not a poor camera, given the price, one would anticipate having the best front camera available on the market. If you use the screen as a flash simulation, note that it will have a better color capture, especially in the foreground, but at the same time appears much more noise and is still not able to balance well the most illuminated areas. With the night mode, we have a very similar result to the automatic mode. so there are not so many differences. Now take a look at the portrait photo with the front camera. I believe, once more, we receive the indication that it's quite a simple and straightforward camera. Pay attention to the very minimal level of detail that we have discovered. Although it does do good foreground and background detection, but it's definitely a disappointing front-facing camera. But the fact that it's a foldable is going to make it so you can use the main camera system. So you can take selfies. In this case, for example, I'm using the ultra-wide camera, and look at the tremendous photo quality that it has compared to the simple front-facing camera that we were seeing on the main camera as well. Observe the excellent level of detail present in the face. Therefore, the fact of having a front-facing. The front camera, which is quite simple and disappointing, is somewhat compensated by the ability to use the rear system for taking good selfies. However, in backlit scenes at night, it still does not perform as expected because it overexposes the most illuminated areas too much. But take note of how it also enhances the quality of portrait photos at night. As we observed a moment ago with the front camera, there is a very detailed level of detail. However, it clearly shows that during the day we also have excellent quality. Actually, it's worth noting that we can use the 200 megapixel mode for selfies, providing an incredibly high level of detail. Interestingly, you can also take 50 megapixel selfies to achieve a good detail level with this camera. But as I mentioned, you can use the ultra-wide, main, or telephoto camera if you want closer detail for some reason. And the portrait photos, with this camera, note that they come out very well defined with good foreground detection, unlike what the front camera can show us, which, although it has good detection, it's very plain. Again, we see low contrast, so practically this front camera is for decoration. It is not going to be used much for selfies. If you want good quality selfies, you need to use the rear system. Interestingly enough, the internal front camera will actually provide us with a broader range of view compared to the external front camera. What you're seeing right now is the front camera. External, which I've shown you in the video, but now check the wider angle of the internal front camera. For group photos, you can unfold the device for a large screen where everyone sees themselves. This camera is much improved from the last generation, though it's no longer under the screen. On the back, there's a 3-camera system. Starting with the ultra-wide camera, it has 13mm and f2 aperture, plus autofocus. Be aware of this as it's a new feature, since the previous generation had a fixed focus and includes a 12-megapixel sensor. Next, we have the main camera, which also improves over the last generation, featuring a 200-megapixel sensor with a 23mm lens, f1.7 aperture, autofocus, and optical stabilization. This main camera also gives us cutouts inside the sensor to have good quality in low-distance digital zoom. And finally, there is the 69mm telephoto camera with f2.4 aperture, autofocus and optical stabilization with a sensor of only 10 megapixels. This is the camera that disappoints completely. In fact, we could say that this photographic system is disappointing, especially for the telephoto camera, because even mid-range devices will be able to offer us practically the same camera configuration, and even in some cases superior configurations at a much lower price. It is very clear that the photographic system is one of the weakest points of this device. Fortunately, at the software level, the experience is really very good and thus compensates a bit for the bad hardware it has in its cameras. Note that the experience is going to be super agile and very fast. If you swipe down, you can also access a burst, in this case of up to 100 photos. And take note that during our test, when trying to capture the number 3, we observed that it could even slightly anticipate the exact moment we press the button, making the response truly instantaneous. Regarding the burst mode, it takes almost half a second to begin, but given its ability to take up to 100 pictures, you can see there's minimal space between each picture. This makes it very easy to extract the precise moment you desire, so overall, the burst function performs exceptionally well. And here, we will find the same options that I previously mentioned for the front camera, including the beauty mode options that come with 4 different settings. Additionally, if you are capturing a close-up scene, take note that there is a macro mode button available. This button will activate the ultra-wide camera along with this focus optimizer. In this section, we can find the slider, which is quite easy to manipulate for adjusting the zoom. Moreover, if we tap on the screen, we can fine-tune the exposure compensation and focus. We can lock the settings to keep them still. In Pro mode, you access manual settings like ISO up to 30,200, shutter speed up to 30 seconds, exposure compensation, focus styles, and white balance. Plus, switch to 50 megapixel mode at the top. In expert mode, change metering type and enable zebra lines for overexposed areas. And here, you have the capability to set the sensitivity level, or alternatively, you can choose to use this false color option. There are numerous options available at the software level that significantly enhance your photography experience. Additionally, you will find access to Expert RAW, a Samsung application that can be installed from the Galaxy Store. Once you have granted all the necessary permissions, it can be used to take pictures with a resolution of 24 megapixels. So, this is absolutely an application that you will certainly need if you desire your pictures to appear with better quality. The traditional camera pictures often lack in many aspects, but at least with Expert RAW, you can achieve a significantly improved performance. You can use any of the three 24 megapixel cameras here. We also see experimental functions for capturing stars or filter simulation, and other options. As you observe, capturing raw images is possible through both the Expert RAW feature and Pro mode. This is because within the settings you have the option to select if you prefer the images to be, whether the photos are taken in RAW, JPEG, or even a combined format, and if you go ahead and install the Camera Assistant module, you'll gain access to extended settings within the camera. This allows you to, for instance, add a shortcut for the 2x crop directly within the sensor, customize how the image smoothing is applied, and choose whether you want the camera to automatically switch between different lenses based on the lighting conditions or the distance from the subject. Additionally, you have the option for distortion correction in ultra-wide photos, and you also have the ability to increase the shutter speed or choose to prioritize focus over speed. In addition to that, you have several other options available here for customizing your video recording experience. Therefore, I strongly believe that the software significantly enhances the overall experience, even though the camera hardware is rather limited. However, it's clear that a major advantage of owning a foldable device is the ability to simply perform this action, and the device will automatically adjust its interface accordingly. This allows us to utilize the mobile device in a different way. For example, we can easily set it on a table, adjust the frame to capture the people we want to photograph, and that's all we need to do. If you own a Galaxy Watch, you can snap a picture from it, or with a Galaxy Ring, a simple gesture activates the shutter. This interface is clearly adaptable for taking such photos. You can even shift the viewfinder to the bottom if you want to view the preview from the top half on the table. And naturally, we will find another button that enables us to move the preview to the cover screen as well. This means that the individuals you intend to photograph will have the opportunity to view the preview, allowing them to get a sense of how the picture is turning out. However, it's important to remind them to focus on the camera rather than the screen. Otherwise, it might appear as if they are gazing elsewhere, which could affect the photo's outcome. For documents, note that here immediately detects the edges and suggests entering this mode through the letter T. Here, we can extract the text in a digital format, or alternatively, we can press this button to save the image in a cropped format. Thus, it is a sufficiently smart scanner. However, it lacks the numerous options that we see, for instance, in Motorola, Honor, and some other brands. These brands allow us to add more pages, export files as PDFs, apply color correction filters, and more. In this context, the reality is that the scanner is now seen as quite basic and straightforward. Samsung, notably, was among the pioneering brands to introduce this scanner directly into their camera systems. However, it hasn't seen much development or improvement since its initial launch. Yet when you consider that Google Drive, for instance, also offers an integrated scanner feature, it's somewhat understandable and forgivable. You simply need to open the Google Camera or Google Drive app to initiate this capture process. Notice that even in Google Drive, the capture happens automatically with color optimization, plus you can add pages, clean up, and more. So, you don't need to install another app, but it would be great if these tools were integrated into the camera app. As for QR codes, there's no issue since the camera's main interface allows this action without any problems. Let's check an ultra-wide camera example. It has nice texture, but if you try to perfect it, the more you'll notice that it doesn't really have as high a level of detail as one would expect in such an expensive device. Fortunately, it handles chromatic aberration well and has slight distortions at the edges, but I think in that sense it's not such a big deal. One thing I like is that it maintains a consistent color feel between the ultra-wide camera and the main camera. They don't appear to be distinct cameras, but clearly, in the main camera, we will observe a greater level of detail. As you can see, the picture quality remains quite good. It can be perceived as high-end within this range. Now notice how, with 2x zoom, it allows us to preserve good quality. While I wouldn't claim it's 100% optical, you can still see a sufficient amount of detail. However, it's important to know that it's not specialized in photography. If you find moments where you realize that it doesn't quite reach the level of quality that the leading figures in mobile photography provide, then that's something to note. Now, you're observing the 3x zoom camera. And once again, I appreciate that it keeps a consistent feel between the digital zoom photography and this optical zoom photography. The level of detail remains as expected, and the pictures continue to look good at this distance. However, when it comes to the maximum zoom capability, it's going to fall significantly short of expectations. You're looking at the main camera. Here's the photo with 2x zoom, and you can already see it lacks high quality. Very good regarding the detail level. Now, you're viewing the 3x camera with optical zoom, and you notice a decent level of detail. However, other devices have honestly surpassed Samsung in photo quality with 5x zoom. Interestingly, it begins to use some artificial intelligence to enhance the details, and you even get a slightly sharper image than the 3x zoom picture for some reason. When we zoom in at 10 times magnification, I would say that we reached the point where it still maintains an excellent quality without any significant loss in detail. Acceptable, since you notice that at 20x you already see little detail, and at 30x you see a very forced. So the long-range zoom definitely falls very short and remains a pending issue in this foldable, but if instead of getting very close you want to zoom out, you know you have the ultra-wide camera, which by the way now has autofocus. This not only benefits the overall picture, but you can also utilize the panorama mode. Samsung stands out as one of the few manufacturers that enables us to merge the panorama mode with the ultra-wide camera. This feature allows you to capture extremely wide pictures, not just on the horizontal axis, but also on the vertical axis, providing you with super wide images. In this way, it's excellent for backlit photography. The preview appears well optimized. On this cloudy day, the device made taking photos seem easier than it really was. Some other phones showed this entire area overexposed in the preview, but here you see the outcome. The ultra-wide camera does a good job balancing highlights and shadows, though it's not perfect. Without chromatic aberration, especially visible in this case in the top right corner. However, in general terms, we could say that it is a photograph that still manages to hold its ground and compete. The primary camera offers improved contrast for backlit situations and continues to keep a well-balanced mix of highlights and shadows. A positive aspect is that even when utilizing 2x digital zoom or 3x optical zoom, it still provides a satisfactory backlit experience. However, it's important to mention that with 3x, the sensor's age becomes apparent, as it loses a considerable amount of detail in photographs taken with long exposure. When it comes to night photography, Samsung still faces challenges with correctly exposing light sources. This is an issue that many manufacturers in the mid-range segment have already addressed and resolved. Therefore, it is puzzling to continue witnessing this same issue with Samsung's devices in the year 2025. The ultra-wide camera fails to produce appealing images because it completely overexposes the brighter areas. Moreover, it struggles to maintain the darker areas in a clean and detailed manner. Utilizing night mode will enhance performance, leading to better quality photos in the aspects I mentioned, but you must activate night mode. With the main camera, overexposure occurs in bright areas, while dark areas have noticeable artifacts, ruining the photo's quality. If you switch to the night mode, it will slightly enhance these aspects. However, I must emphasize that other devices, even those in the mid-range category, don't require you to use night mode to achieve good night photography. When using the telephoto camera, the situation is similar, but in this case, there is no noticeable improvement with the night mode. Therefore, the cameras seem to be from the year 2022. For macro photography, I think the device can do a good job. The main camera does not allow us to be so close to the objects by the nature of the sensor, but obviously by applying digital zoom U, can be closer and have a very good level of detail. There is still nothing to complain about here. Even as I anticipated, the ultra-wide camera now also has autofocus, so you could be close to these objects, tiny objects, even if the ultra-wide camera lacks some quality, in general as if we see it for the main camera. When it comes to moving pictures, the ultra-wide camera performs quite well. However, there are moments when it can be somewhat shaky, which depends on how quickly it moves and the amount of light available in the environment. Interestingly, the main camera exhibits some movement distortions, which are very rapid because of the sensor's high resolution. As you begin to zoom in, you'll notice this distortion even more, and sweeping movements will become even more apparent in the camera. The telephoto lens, the oldest one here, is totally unacceptable on such an expensive cell phone. Of course, the device also lets us capture 50 megapixel photographs. It's important to note that it maintains a good level of detail in this regard. When you view a photograph, you can see the sharpness corresponding to that resolution, which allows you to apply some cropping to the same photograph. Additionally, we can now take photographs in 200 megapixel mode, and Once more, observe the level of detail it achieves. Even the leaves that were very far away are captured with excellent detail, which allows us to crop the image and still obtain a photograph of really high quality. Look, for example, at this level of detail in the texture of the mesh. It looks truly spectacular. Portrait photography is quite good, as expected from a high-end device, but it doesn't reach the same advanced level. This is mainly because the blur effect it produces doesn't appear as sophisticated as that of some other cell phones, which have absolutely spectacular portrait capabilities. One positive aspect here is that it does maintain foreground objects in sharp focus, providing a good representation. It even allows us to use the 2x or even 3x perspective effectively. The camera still has a good portrait photography, but I insist that it looks a bit basic if you compare it with other cell phones specialized in photography. So Samsung is falling quite short in the photographic section. For video recording, this device reaches up to 8K with the main camera or 4K at 60 FPS with others, offering great capabilities. In the interface, you'll find useful buttons. For instance, you can enable or disable super stable mode and HDR recording, which is now default for more realistic videos. Just like in photography, it comes with the focus optimizer available so that sometimes when you're very close to some objects, it automatically switches to the ultra-wide camera to give you focus. Additionally, it is significantly more consistent when you begin your video recording. Take note that it includes a convenient button for taking pictures during the recording process. Moreover, you have the option to pause and resume the recording whenever you need. There is even a feature that allows you to switch to the front camera without having to stop your video recording, which is incredibly useful and practical in many situations. Additionally, we are going to locate the button to turn on the flashlight without interrupting the recording, and there's also a very convenient slider for the zoom. This slider allows you to switch between different modes. You can choose a mode with quick shortcuts for instantly switching between various distances, or you can press it to switch to a much smoother scrolling. This depends on whether you prefer to scroll smoothly or more quickly. So this feature allows you to maintain a smooth and consistent motion, and the truth is, it can be quite useful depending on the style of video recording you aim to achieve. It's important to consider that in this section, where the special buttons are located, we will also find this particular one, which is the exposure compensation button. This button would enable us to adjust the image to be slightly darker in certain scenarios where the device might otherwise overexpose the image, or do the opposite action, causing underexposure. This adjustment can be crucial in achieving the desired visual effect. We will also discover the traditional automatic framing feature, which enables us to keep a person centered without needing to move the cell phone, although the resolution decreases to Full HD. Furthermore, among the remaining modes, we will come across the Video Pro, where we can access manual parameters including ISO up to 3000, 200, shutter speed up to 1/30 seconds, and once more exposure compensation focus as well as white balance. In fact, in this case, it also adds the option to record video in log format to be able to colorize it later in post-production. Although in reality, Samsung itself provides an option in the gallery for applying some colorization. This feature is clearly designed for professional editors. However, if you accidentally record it in this log mode, not everything is lost. Even without professional tools, you can simply swipe up and the color correct button will appear, allowing the device to restore color to your video. Obviously, when you record in log format, it naturally appears pale by default. This is because it's capturing a vast amount of information. You can also utilize it later on in professional editing software, so it actually works quite well. And right over here, we are also going to discover the microphone management options, because you have the ability to choose if you prefer omnidirectional audio, or perhaps you want the audio to come from the front, or maybe from the rear. Additionally, you can even utilize USB accessories or Bluetooth headphones. What's more, you have the option to create a blend of Bluetooth with the integrated microphones of the cell phone. This flexibility truly provides you with exceptional management capabilities when it comes to handling the audio of your videos. And right here in the additional options, we have the ability to configure the tone, contrast, highlights, shadows, saturation, and tint. This allows us to customize our recording from the very moment we start recording. Additionally, in the settings, you'll notice it offers the capability to record videos at a higher bit rate. This feature is incredibly useful if you're planning to record scenes with a lot of action, as it provides better definition and quality. Although, of course, it results in a heavier video file, the increase in quality is significant. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, there are options for HDR and log. It even lets you record 360 audio when you have compatible audio equipment. Moreover, it allows the audio player to keep playing while you're recording. This feature can be quite useful if you plan to record something based on the sound you're currently playing. It's definitely very comprehensive. Furthermore, it includes autofocus tracking, making the video recording interface extremely good and incredibly comprehensive. And naturally, when it comes to video recording, we have the option to utilize the folding capabilities. As I had already demonstrated to you in a picture earlier, this is precisely the case. Similarly, you have the ability to adjust the view, and you can also reposition the preview or activate the view on the cover screen. All these options are available for you to utilize. Now, let's examine the results of video recording. Firstly, it's important to note that the device is capable of recording video in 8K resolution. This feature allows us to zoom in during post-production and reframe what we have recorded, ensuring that we maintain a high level of detail. It's not something that you're going to be using every single day, but it's nice to know that it already has these capabilities. Now, take a look at what it would appear like in 4K at 60 frames per second. You can record this not only with the ultra-wide camera, but also with the main camera, and even with the telephoto camera. This allows you to achieve this level of fluidity and a good level of detail simultaneously across all the cameras, which is definitely a positive feature. But let's get down to the basics, so to speak, and explore more. 4K at 30 frames per second. The color quality appears to be very impressive, with excellent contrast visible as well. Overall, Samsung is known as one of the manufacturers that offers the best video recording quality, and this model is certainly no exception. It provides a consistent color experience between the main camera and the ultra-wide camera, upholding the excellent benefits that I had mentioned earlier. Even with the telephoto camera, it keeps the same consistent color feel, which is very good. When it comes to this aspect, Samsung software appears to be quite mature. By default, the device records in HDR with a 10-bit color depth, which means it performs exceptionally well in this area. The video seems quite straightforward regarding backlight treatment, yet it was anything but simple. Nonetheless, the device does an outstanding job recording in these challenging backlit conditions, and this was achieved using the ultra-wide camera. The main camera will obviously have even more quality. However, I must emphasize that it maintains a very consistent feel between both cameras. Even when recording with the telephoto camera, you don't notice that the back area, where there's more light, gets burnt or overexposed. There aren't any aggressive jumps in the exposure or anything like that, so it behaves really well. At night, you can notice how the HDR could help, but it's not high enough. Notice how the ultra-wide camera is going to struggle in darker areas. There is quite a bit of noise. The brighter areas it does not expose correctly, and even some blue or purple pigmentation is noticeable at times. In darker areas, the main camera does not improve as much. It only controls noise better in areas that are well lit, receiving the illumination directly. In that sense, provides a very satisfactory outcome as anticipated. However, in more intricate situations, for instance, when a light source enters the frame or in areas with lower light, you can observe that it struggles a bit more to achieve an excellent result. It's not bad, but the truth is that Samsung is once more falling rather short, and there hasn't been any noticeable improvement over several generations. Regarding the quality of the night video recording, particularly when you're using the camera, I believe that the quality is somewhat lacking. It seems to be a bit too low when it comes to capturing videos at night. The telephoto lens will further diminish the dynamic range, which means if there's a light source in the scene, it will prioritize exposing that correctly. However, this will cause the rest of the image to become quite dark. On the other hand, if there isn't any light source in the frame, it significantly increases light gathering to enhance the image quality. Nonetheless, there are a few seconds where it works on reducing noise, and due to this, I feel it doesn't perform well enough in night video recording. We are now looking at the stabilization in 4K with the ultra-wide camera, and obviously with this camera, movements are very well controlled, not only when walking but even when running. Having a wide angle, I think it manages to compensate quite well. Movements and even when changing the main camera, if you are walking, it appears to have excellent stabilization. However, if you are running, it will make things a bit more complicated, especially if you're in an area with numerous shadows. In any case, it is still perceived as a good quality. When it comes to stabilization and even while walking with the telephoto camera, we observe an impressive level of stabilization. In this regard, I believe it performs as one might anticipate. The device even features a super stable mode which, although it reduces the resolution, can be beneficial for capturing more action-packed scenes, particularly while running. This is because it prioritizes the use of the ultra-wide camera. However, it still allows you to switch to the main camera while maintaining this super stable effect. I must emphasize that, in my opinion, it functions quite effectively. The stabilization is a strong point of this device. Well done by Samsung. The focus isn't fast. You won't see an instant change, but it adjusts well. It can't focus closely with the main camera, but the soft focus helps not to lose it during subtle movements. By switching to the ultra-wide camera, you will be able to focus from much closer distances, which is a significant advantage. This is a benefit that past generations did not have, and it greatly helps when capturing video of very small objects. Without a doubt, this represents an important evolution in camera technology. However, it is worth noting that the focusing speed is somewhat slow. It does not seem as fast as one might expect. The same issue will occur with the telephoto camera, which, although capable of adjusting correctly, also experiences a similar lag. Though not from a close distance, its behavior is positive in this regard. The zoom also indicates that it is definitely going to be. The quality is quite good when it comes to transitioning between lenses. You don't notice any abrupt changes or anything like that. In this particular case, it allows us to achieve up to 12x digital zoom. Of course, this will obviously be a weak point when you compare it to other devices that use traditional formats. It must be said that it also has a soft zoom mode that allows you to have a continuous zoom, either slow or fast as you prefer, and it definitely helps a lot. It keeps good stabilization when you are at the maximum zoom level, so you choose if you want very fast or very slow movements. In any of the scenarios, the behavior of the device is really... The sole downside might be the level of detail, which, even though it reaches up to 12x, doesn't appear to be particularly appealing. What's interesting about this device is that it also comes with a portrait recording mode that blurs the background. Something I find appealing is that this mode is available in 4K resolution, which is unlike most devices that don't offer such high resolution. The ideal situation is when you are quite close to the camera. In this scenario, if you move away or come closer, it only slightly alters the intensity of the blur effect, and it remains intact even if it stops detecting a face. Notably, even when recording in backlight, it maintains good quality. In the case of objects, they might not be detected at 100%, but the system does make a considerable effort to detect the objects surrounding you to preserve a sense of naturalness. This device also offers us the fast camera mode, in this case with stabilization and in 4K, also with a setting that goes from 5x, which could be useful for recording movements of people or when you go walking or something similar, and is able to go up to 60x, which can get to stay A. It's somewhat limited for more stunning landscapes. For simple scenes, it's adequate, but it's worth noting that other devices can record up to 1,800 times or even faster. Samsung, however, remains stuck and hasn't yet offered a faster camera option. Additionally, we also have slow motion in 4K at 120 frames per second, something that few devices today allow. So it's great to see it available on this cell phone. And we can even go a little slower and get to 240 frames per second, but in full HD resolution, so it no longer looks as detailed, but it fulfills what one would expect. Here the bad thing is that it does not have a super slow motion mode that we can find in some other flagships. Interestingly, Samsung used to have a super slow motion mode, then removed it, and it has not been made available again. The video recording with the front camera again comes to disappoint. It is a camera that is perceived as low level, although the video is in 8K. Actually, the level of detail does not look as high as we would like in such an expensive device, as happened in the photograph. This external front camera needs to improve if it really wants to be an alternative to traditional format devices. The camera lacks detail, and while the dynamic range is just okay, the main issue is the absence of autofocus. For instance, the camera on the Galaxy S25 Ultra is significantly superior. However, the advantage of a foldable device is that you can, for example, use the ultra-wide rear camera to record, which offers improved color and contrast, and wider. Switch to the main camera to see the incredible detail it offers. It even creates a natural bokeh effect due to the sensor's characteristics. Just note that the screen or viewfinder is at the top, so it can look a little strange when you turn to look at the camera, and then when you turn to look at the screen. You could even record with the telephoto camera, although it is something that is not going to be so common, but if you want to highlight some detail of the face or something like that, you can do it even recording with this rear system. Notice that it comes with good stabilization if you're walking around, and we're also going to see that it has a higher dynamic range than what we were seeing with the front camera, which wasn't too bad. But in this case, especially with the main camera, we see super good light and shadow control. I like the result when you see it through an HDR monitor, but if you don't see it through an HDR monitor, you might perceive the shadow area as darker. Actually, all the clips you have watched were converted from HDR to SDR to ensure they are viewable on any screen. However, it is certainly much better to capture them with the... Returning to this selfie format, there's actually an interesting point to note. You can also use the super stable mode while recording with the rear cameras in this selfie format. Something I found impressive is that even in the super stable mode, the transition between different cameras is remarkably quick. There's no noticeable delay when switching from one camera to another. This feature indeed provides a very premium experience. Luckily, with the external front camera, we'll have the following options available. The quick camera mode behaves just like before. Sure, you can use the rear system or the ultra-wide camera or any other to record videos in fast motion with the same good behavior we have already seen. You will also have available the slow motion mode with the external front camera, although with a basic behavior in full HD at 120 frames per second. Although for slow motion, it is also advisable to use the external system with which you could access to 4K at 120 frames per second, not just with the main camera, but you can also use the ultra-wide camera for slow motion at the same quality, achieving spectacular results. You also have the option of recording portrait video with the front camera. The truth is that the result looks nice, it looks natural, there is a good blur applied to the background, it records well. Even when backlit, although it struggles a bit to keep objects in focus. But the highlight is that if it is in 4K, the rear system shows more detailed images but struggles with focus, so it's not perfectly reliable. Yet it works well. I believe it can work. And, well, when you look at it during the night, you can see that this would be the outcome with the front camera. It's not bad, but I believe there is quite a bit of noise present, especially in the darkest areas. You don't see a video with as much contrast or detail, again implying that the front-facing camera isn't the most spectacular. However, recording with the rear system, the video quality goes up a lot. It improves the colors, improves the light input, improves even in the darker areas where you do not see so much noise present, although as with the front camera, it is not as good as the front camera. As observed in our night recording test using this camera, there are certain instances where the darker regions might become slightly tinted with a purple hue. Additionally, the ultra-wide camera, which naturally has reduced light input, may produce images that are less detailed and exhibit more noise. So for nighttime, it's best to use the main camera if you're aiming for the highest image quality possible. And, well, finally, don't forget that you have the dual camera mode available, which allows you to show both the front and rear cameras simultaneously. In this case, I appreciate that it features rounded corners, and you can position the frame wherever you like. Additionally, you have the option to rotate the image whenever you wish, without needing to edit the video. It's important to note that it keeps autofocus enabled. However, Samsung has a significant flaw, which is that it doesn't allow you to zoom while recording in this mode. This means you have to stop and restart the recording using the main lens that maintains focus, but again, it doesn't permit zooming. On the bright side, you can record in 4K using this mode, which is something that others don't allow you to do, but it's somewhat inconvenient. Having to stop and restart recording to change the zoom. Here, you can only switch between the three lenses, with no digital zoom when recording, reducing this mode's versatility. Finally, you also have the option of using split screen mode if you wish for both cameras to share the same space, exhibiting identical behavior. This means you can rotate the view and autofocus will be enabled. However, the zoom function will be entirely disabled. When it comes to the software, we will be seeing One UI 8 operating on Android 16. This is fantastic news as it arrives fully updated straight from the factory, which is exactly what you would expect from such a high-end device. Even better news is that we will receive 7 years of software updates along with 7 years of security patches. This means you have assured support, and it is not a device that will quickly become outdated or anything of that sort. Also, Samsung offers many options to enhance devices. For instance, modes and routines automate elements on your phone, even syncing with Galaxy ecosystem devices. In routines, you can set conditions to trigger various activities. For instance, here we will choose the action of charging the phone as the trigger. When it senses charging via cable, we'll see a huge list of options for consequences. You can automate many things with this phone. But to illustrate, I'll select that when calls are answered, the speakerphone will automatically activate. This is a simple routine to show its potential. You can nest conditions and consequences for endless actions. The experience is great. We'll also have game routines, so when you open a game, you can choose optimization levels and more. Next, we will locate the edge panel function. We already understand that it enables us to incorporate various options, including not just shortcuts to applications, which are, by the way, quite helpful, but also shortcuts to contacts for messaging or calling, or even tasks directly within applications. For instance, this includes not only accessing the calendar, but also providing direct access to add events to it. Similarly, this applies to other applications with shortcuts available here. Additionally, we can add weather panels, tools, and more. However, it no longer allows for installing more panels via the Galaxy Store. In truth, it is quite an effective tool. For instance, here we could edit the shortcut to various applications, and you can continue adding any applications you desire to the list. And in this particular case, from this small sidebar, we are also going to have the capability to open applications in a floating window mode. So notice that by dragging, for example, towards the center, we will be able to open the application in a floating window either up or down. We would have the option for a split screen available as well. So with just one touch, we can achieve this level of versatility. Of course, these floating windows can be configured exactly as we want in terms of their position and size. We'll also have the capability to open multiple windows simultaneously. This means we can run numerous applications at once. When the device is unfolded, it provides even more space for additional open applications. It's a device that will excel in productivity by allowing us to keep many applications open at the same time. Actually, a new feature is in the split screen view. Observe how we can almost maximize an app while keeping a small area for the previous one. Notice how a single tap lets us switch between apps in nearly full size. This is useful when working with large applications. This is something that was not available in past generations. Of course, you can also maintain a completely split view with apps running and active. However, I find this new addition quite interesting. In fact, take note that at the top there is a small bar which you can tap to open any other application within that same block, or to transform these applications into a floating window mode. Interestingly enough, in this particular case, it does not yet include a mode that allows us to open 3 applications simultaneously in this split screen display. However, thanks to the floating windows feature, we are able to run more than 5 applications at the same time without encountering any issues. We can easily minimize them by just moving them to the side or clicking on them to convert them into a small bubble. It offers very impressive multitasking features. When it comes to customizing the home screen, you'll find a wide array of options available. In fact, I've included a video in the description where I explain all the good lock modules you can use to personalize your phone in a highly extreme manner. This application, developed by Samsung, is known for experimenting with innovative features, so if you're interested in fully utilizing the potential of your Galaxy device, I warmly invite you to explore it further. To watch that video, since it undoubtedly has far better tools than those offered by any other manufacturer. However, let's discuss the tools that are already included by default in the system. For instance, we will find here a quick selector for your wallpapers, although it doesn't yet include templates like some other cell phones do, which I think would make it a bit more appealing. But notice how, in this case, we have the option to select the wallpaper, and once we are in the editing section of this wallpaper, we might apply effects with this frame. And notice how it can detect the depth, more or less, to make the background appear more attractive. You also have the option to select the color of your screen's background. Additionally, we have the ability to customize our clock, which now comes with a new feature. This feature will adapt to the shape of your wallpaper, slightly stretching the typography to give a very nice and appealing result. Take a look, for instance, at how things would alter if we modify the frame to resemble a heart shape. Notice here how it adapts the length that this clock possesses in relation to its height. Additionally, we have the ability to apply various effects as well, where we could, for example, we can, however, make use of the good lock modules to blur the image, apply a portrait effect, or even convert our image to grayscale and similar colors. Pay attention to how we will notice this effect of the stretch clock. In the always on display view, observe that the clock is not stretched. However, once we enter the lock screen, you will see this small effect. It's quite subtle yet very pleasing, and it's something we haven't observed in many other devices. This effect adds a unique touch that enhances the overall aesthetic. So, the customization options for the lock screen appear to be quite satisfactory to me. Although it's not the most customizable feature we can find by default, there are ways to enhance it further through the use of good lock modules that provide additional customization. If we were able to achieve a level of complete customization, extreme. And note that here we also have available different styles for the clock, whether we want something analog, digital, with calendar, or as you want. The truth is that there are many options. Even in this case, as I have installed good lock, I still appear more options, but I insist this requires the installation of that additional application, allowing you to access even more extreme customization. We will also find a fully available theme center at your fingertips with some free content, other paid for with a single touch to customize your cell phone, although obviously there may be sections of the system that do not appear customized to 100%, so the most advisable if you want extreme customization is to do everything manually, but hey, you as a user choose if you want something comfortable or want something a little more extreme. In the store, we have themes, wallpapers, some free, some paid, and icon packs. Through Good Lock, you can use third-party icons from Google Play Store. We also have always-on display skins that are fully customizable. We'll discuss more on how this feature works shortly. Next, we'll discover some customization tools for the home screen. For instance, we have the ability to adjust the size of the icons to our preference, and we can also choose to either show or hide the text labels that display the name of each application. The same goes for widgets, and note that from this generation, the home screen is synchronized between the internal screen and the external screen. Note that, for example, this would be the first screen. The phone shown is the second screen, including the distribution of widgets, so that in this case there is a much more uniform feeling at the time to be accommodating all your widgets and icons, although you could also select if you want to not play the same information, but each screen has its own distribution. We can enable or disable the app drawer for your preferred operation and adjust the home screen and folder grid. The first page defaults to Google Discover, but you can choose Samsung News or turn off the home screen to save resources. We will additionally find the option to add a button on the screen, which can be used to open a list of applications. There is also an option available to lock the contents, ensuring that absolutely nothing can move. Furthermore, here appears an option to hide applications, along with other options that allow you to work with the rotation to the horizontal screen. In fact, this is something that very few devices permit, and in this particular case, even on the external screen, we will notice that the elements rotate and adapt quite well. Next, we locate the Always On Display settings. Here, it can show us not just the time, but also the wallpaper in a dimmed form, allowing the time to remain visible on the screen. An appealing view on your device even when off, though it will use a lot of power. Battery, but hey, it stays on for as long as you want it to. In fact, in this case, Samsung allows you to configure it in an even more detailed way. For example, it has an automatic and smart setting, but you can select if you want it to never, absolutely never turn off, or if you want to set a scheduled time for it to be running, or just when you receive new notifications, so it's pretty handy. We will additionally have an option to erase the background if we have an image. For instance, notice how in Always Display mode it would appear with a completely black background. However, when we activate the screen, it would bring the background to life, along with the clock stretching effect. Thus, you have all these options available too. Now let's discuss the NL bar, which by default will also be displayed on the lock screen. You know, this feature is going to provide us with real-time information about our favorite soccer matches or other sports. Additionally, it displays multimedia controls. For instance, when we play YouTube music, we will notice that on our lock screen, we will find this small bar that we have the option to tap on, which will display the complete list of controls, or we will also have the ability to scroll in order to switch between various instances of the Neo bar, as an example. Additionally, it could display the Now Brief, which is a concise summary of the day's events. Furthermore, some of these live activities will also appear minimized on this display. Top section to be able to show all the controls or enter fully into the application. So definitely the functioning of the Neo bar is pretty good, because it will also be available, for example, when you get directions from Google Maps, or it will also give you information from Samsung Health, access to the interpreter when it detects that you're in another country where they don't speak your own language. I can show you the timer. Watch as we select a 1-minute timer and it appears. I would appreciate it if the information could be centered, just as a small detail. However, here you have the opportunity to interact with all these elements. Not only here, but also in this small floating capsule. And as you can observe, you have the ability to alternate as well between live elements when recording a memo, or directly thank you. Recording in Samsung Notes will bring up those options, and even emergency announcements, or some smart controls for your smart home devices, and even Samsung Wallet, which, by the way, is surprisingly available on the home screen. Since normally you swipe for other activities, but here it opens Samsung Wallet. Here's a tip. To disable this, go to Samsung Wallet settings, enter the quick access section to turn off membership on the lock screen, and disable the swipe up gestures. By the way, another aspect that could be bothersome for some users is the separation of the notifications panel from the control center. While it does look much cleaner, some users have grown accustomed to seeing their controls directly here. Therefore, we also provide the option to revert to the previous configuration. You can easily do this by accessing the panel settings and selecting the Altogether option. Once configured, controls are on your home screen for you to decide what you enjoy the most, and on the application screen, for example, we will have the option of an alphabetical order with this vertical scroll, or the traditional custom pages order horizontally. Additionally, the device comes with a pop-up notification style that is not typically seen on other Android devices. Only on the Galaxy, which allows us to configure this effect when receiving a notification. As you can see, the outline of the screen lights up and shows some different animations as well. Here, in this section, we will have the capability to choose a specific color. This is because it automatically adopts the color of the application from which you are getting the notification. Moreover, you have the option to configure the duration and several other aspects when you receive each notification. Additionally, keep in mind that with this particular style of notifications, you can scroll down the notification to open it in a pop-up window mode, allowing you to respond to your messages more conveniently and efficiently. Furthermore, naturally, we will possess the capability to adjust the size of these floating windows and position them according to our preferences. Additionally, we will discover within the advanced features a section referred to as Labs, where we have the option to compel all applications to operate in a floating window mode without any limitations. Exception. Additionally, there is the forced horizontal view, which can be used only when the device is deployed. This forces all applications to run in the horizontal view, despite the screen being quite square. So, in reality, there isn't much difference in that regard. Then we'll also find apps that are going to always work in dark mode, even if we don't have dark mode enabled. And we also find this new Android 16 option that allows us to give an accurate view. What's behind? Before you finish releasing your finger when making these gestures, keep in mind that with this option turned off, that view does not appear. However, this small button or arrow does show up, indicating that we will go back. I believe this provides us with a clearer idea of where we are headed, which definitely helps a lot in understanding the navigation. We also have the option to configure what we would like to happen with the side button. By default, it is set to open the camera, but you can select another application instead. Additionally, by pressing and holding the button, you can modify its behavior further. We will also encounter the traditional gestures and motions, such as lifting the device to activate the screen or double tapping with the screen off to turn it on. In fact, if you are looking to save a bit more battery life, you might consider turning off these options to try and reduce power consumption. Additionally, you can turn off the screen by double tapping on an empty area of the home screen. However, you need to ensure this option is enabled for it to function properly. Moreover, you already know that you have the ability to To turn off the screen, you simply place your entire palm on it. So, if your phone is resting on the table, just lay your hand over it completely to switch it off. If you have missed calls or messages, you can choose this option to make the phone vibrate when you pick it up from a table, and we also have the gesture for placing the phone on a table. The device is flipped upside down to silence it during a call. Additionally, there's the classic Samsung gesture to capture the screen, which I find less practical because it requires moving your entire hand over the screen, and it doesn't always succeed. Sometimes you need to repeat the gesture. I prefer the 3-finger gesture that most other brands offer. What is definitely useful is that when you are making these captures, if you have the scroll capture available, it allows you to display a lot more content than what this device can traditionally show. And naturally, when you're in the process of editing, you have a variety of options available to you. Among these options is the choice of using a small brush. This tool allows you to attempt to censor specific contents. By using this method, you can make an effort to obscure or hide certain contents that you prefer not to be fully visible or seen in their entirety. The device lets us set screenshots to auto-delete after sharing or hide status and navigation bars. You can choose to save the original screenshot after editing and decide between JPEG or PNG formats, as well as the folder for saving them. Regarding screen recordings, you have the option to choose not only the sound source but also the recording quality. You can decide if you prefer it to be in full HD, or you also have the option to display your front camera in various sizes. And you can choose whether you want the touches to be visible or not. Additionally, when your device is in flex mode, which means it's in a partially folded position, you have the capability to record just the upper half of the screen. This also provides versatility. There's a video effects section, which means video call effects, letting you change your background to a solid color or a pre-selected image. Like in this case, we are about to choose an image for outdoors, and these effects work well with Google Meet, Gmail, YouTube, Microsoft Teams, WhatsApp, Zoom, and probably several other applications too. For instance, notice that during a video call, we will have the ability to scroll down to reach the controls. Here, we can modify the video effects by selecting either a blurred background or a background with a solid color. Additionally, as I mentioned, you also have the option to choose An image must be able to appear in this background. Additionally, we will have various options, like facial beauty with just one slider. There is also the choice to adjust the tone of an image, making it slightly warmer or cooler, or even adjusting the light to be more or less, depending on how you prefer the image to appear. You will also discover the automatic framing feature. Although enabling this option will turn off the background effects, it will consistently keep us centered. So even if I move around, it will ensure we remain in the center. If the device is tilted to one side or the other, it will attempt to crop the image to keep me centered. Lastly, we also have reactions available, and as I mentioned, this doesn't rely on any specific app since it functions in WhatsApp and other applications. You can send these reactions manually, or it also features automatic detection. For instance, when engaging in this type of, the device also responds to these gestures. Conditions. By the way, you can not only change the video mode, but there is also a microphone mode. This mode allows you to have the standard audio pickup and also cancel the noise, so that only the voice is highlighted. Alternatively, you can choose the full spectrum, which could be useful if you want to make a video call with music. This way, the cell phone can also transmit the music and not detect it as noise. So, the video call experience on this device is very complete and versatile. Additionally, we come across an option that allows us to enhance the brightness of the videos we are currently watching, as well as the Super HDR option that I mentioned earlier. In the section dedicated to the screen, we will also discover the Galaxy Avatar feature. This function permits us to create our own personalized characters. Naturally, it can be synchronized with Samsung Cloud, allowing us to generate characters based on the presets that are already available. Alternatively, we have the option to capture a photograph, enabling the device to automatically attempt to generate a character that resembles the image. Avatar customization is highly extensive. There are endless hairstyles, facial hair types, face shapes, chins, and wrinkles. You can apply makeup, molds, set eyebrow size and type, eye and eyelid shapes, eyelash position, nose type and size, and lips, even with ears, and also with accessories such as robotic arms and other similar items that you can attach. Honestly, I find the movements too effeminate for my taste, but you can add clothing styles, some paid, some free. Once done, save your avatar to generate stickers available on your keyboard. You can download several stickers, so you can create them with your character, and I insist they'll show up on your keyboard. Notice that on the keyboard we can access the emojis and stickers section, and here they are readily available for use. The only downside that I can see is that when you send them, they are actually sent as an image. It doesn't appear as an advanced sticker, so the experience isn't as positive when this happens. However, these stickers can be fully customized to your preferences. In fact, you can edit them and even start adding various effects, such as changing their position. You can change the background and animations, adding stickers, editing facial expressions, adding text, and even more characters if you've created several. So, the truth is, there's a fully comprehensive suite of customization with this avatar. In fact, we also offer the avatar camera option, letting us replace our face to record videos or take pictures with these effects. It includes other characters you can use, and there's a mirror section that will display your character in a smaller size here, allowing you to place it on a table or similar surface. Additionally, there is the play mode, which using augmented reality will position your character. And at last, the scene effect is going to have a solid feel. Additionally, you have the option to design your own clothing. Simply choose the type of garment you wish to create. After that, you can either take a picture of your existing clothes or choose from one of the available patterns here. These avatars can be used when you are on call screens or in your profile image. Furthermore, you can assign them to your own profile as well as to the profiles of your contacts. Moreover, you can eventually create a video to share on social networks or use it for your call screen, lock screen, or even as your alarm background. For instance, you can set your character to appear dancing when your alarm rings. Actually, there are numerous effects available, allowing you to add multiple characters at once to be seen here, either dancing or doing other activities. Actually, I insist there are many animations, yet I find some movements a bit effeminate for my taste. But that's just personal preference. Here you have access to a wide selection of various effects that can be applied to your characters, allowing you to customize them to your liking and create these types of videos. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that the one-handed mode is incredibly useful. It can adapt to either left-handed or right-handed use, resizing the entire screen accordingly. It even gives you the option to adjust the view to be positioned a bit higher up, if you prefer that, or lower to fit it entirely to your liking to be able to use the cell phone with a lot of comfort. In the gallery, we find the option Press and hold on a person, for instance, to automatically extract their image. You can actually navigate through the interface to switch to another application and insert the image there. For example, here, you can place it in a Samsung Notes note. That's all there is to it. Notice how effectively it functions. Although in this particular case, I wish that within WhatsApp it would be sent as a sticker. Unfortunately, it gets sent as an image, which diminishes its quality significantly. It looks very simple, so what we can do is hold down on the image and then select that we want to save it as a sticker. And in this case, observe that it has different styles, and it will be saved within the library of stickers that we can use both in the photo editor and also inside the keyboard. So just enter the sticker section and note that in this case, the stickers that we have generated will also appear, and through this interface, it is sent as stickers. So at least you can get this generation of stickers directly with the system. And clearly, if there is text within a photograph, we have the ability to press and hold on the image, allowing us to extract the text from it. The text, although if it is a text that is not very well defined, it could present some difficulties. However, through this button, we can attempt to select it. Of course, we can also choose multiple images to create a GIF, a collage, or a video. It includes a basic video editor, which is not particularly sophisticated, but it does allow you to combine several images or videos into a single one. But I insist, it is not a very sophisticated editor. It also allows you to add some stickers, a little music, and a little editing, but everything is pretty simple. It is also worth noting the incorporation of Samsung members, through which we will be able to have access to different promotions as Galaxy users. Note, for example, not only there are promotions to buy Samsung devices, but also, for instance, you receive a discount on your first purchase with Mercado Pago. You also get promotions in flower stores, clothing stores, and other apps. Samsung offers many benefits for having a Galaxy. The software remains the device's strongest point. Let's touch on Galaxy briefly, as I have a detailed video explaining each tool step by step. I've included the link in the description for those interested in learning how these tools function. It's really useful. For instance, the call assistant can directly translate what you're saying. We're also going to find the writing assistant to compose and translate even some chats. The interpreter, which you know will allow you to translate in different languages, all locally without the need for an internet connection, which is one of the main benefits of Galaxy. Regarding other AI tools available on various devices, it can also assist in reformatting your notes and transcribing your voice recordings directly. And always keep in mind that all these processes occur within the device itself, without requiring an internet connection. Furthermore, in the web browser, we will find tools to summarize content, translate it, or even read it aloud. Naturally, there will be numerous functions available for photo editing, including generative editing and sketch-to-image capabilities, allowing you to draw a simple doodle and then transform it into a more intricate drawing. Besides the Portrait Studio, there's also the Drawing Assistant, which turns doodles into refined images. A feature I didn't mention in the Galaxy video is the Audio Eraser, a new addition with the Galaxy S25 Ultra, and it's impressive. See in a video how this Galaxy button works, and it will automatically analyze the audio, dividing it into categories like noise, wind, or voices. If many people are talking, that category appears too, allowing you to reduce the noise. For instance, you can lower wind and external noise to enhance the voice. It's a combination you can create directly on your cell phone without needing an internet connection. Therefore, it's an incredibly useful artificial intelligence tool. In this generation, it's not just available in the video gallery, but now, for example, it will also be integrated within the audio recorder itself. Here, you will not only have the ability to transcribe, as I had mentioned before, but in this instance, a button will appear here for the audio eraser as well. In order to activate or deactivate the feature, as well as to thoroughly clean all of the audio recordings that you have stored, follow these steps. The exact same situation will occur within Samsung Notes if you have made a voice recording and embedded it in this app, which is truly quite beneficial. Therefore, once more, when you play the audio, you will notice that this audio eraser button is very handy. If you record your classes or similar activities, it will certainly be of great assistance to you. Even the recordings you make of your phone calls can also be cleaned using this audio eraser feature. There is another feature of Galaxy AI that I hadn't mentioned in the dedicated video I created for you. This feature is quite fascinating because it assists us in generating emojis. Let's take a closer look at how it works. For instance, we can choose this particular option here, and then we'll proceed to describe what we want, like a soccer ball wearing a Mexican hat. After that, we simply press the generate button. We'll need to be patient for a few moments as it works its magic, adding the final touches. Once we press done, we have the option to send it as a sticker. This makes it a fun and creative way to design your very own personalized emojis. The Now Brief is another of those options that I had not told you about because it is relatively new. It's going to allow you to have a summary directly on your screen, although it doesn't currently show too much information. If you want it to work as well as possible, you have to go to the settings to give permission so that it is also able to analyze your best moments of the day. It will show you, for example, your most special photos. It will show you the weather forecast, your activity, and so on. When synced with your watch, it can even suggest some Spotify playlist for you, or even some YouTube videos. However, I must emphasize, you need to activate all these permissions and select your account for a more personalized experience. It's not as easy as a single tap, but you must enable them. To truly make it work, you will need several permissions. The hope is that in the future, it will be capable of offering you more suggestions or reminders right at a glance. The concept is to provide a sort of summary both in the morning and in the evening, enabling you to easily perform a comprehensive review with just a single touch. And well, we already know that Gemini is integrated as an AI assistant on all Android devices. However, since Samsung collaborates closely with Google, in this case, Gemini functions effectively even with system apps. For instance, we can set an alarm, add a reminder, and other items, and it will seamlessly work together with the system applications. Let's go ahead and give you a few examples. Set an alarm for today at 7:40 tonight and observe as it performs an analysis. It does take a bit more time than Bixby for these sorts of tasks, but voila, indeed it's going to function properly. Now let's proceed to add a reminder. Add a reminder for today at 8 o'clock tonight to upload the Samsung video. And take note that once again, there it appears. It is also linked with Samsung Reminder to incorporate this type of item. So yes, it can connect with Samsung applications. In fact, Gemini also allows us to interact with items we are viewing. For example, a YouTube video. Let's open Gemini and press Ask About Video and notice that it will now reference the YouTube video. So I'm going to tell it to generate a 3-paragraph summary and add it to a Samsung Notes. And notice, it's going to be all this that I told it. It's connecting to YouTube, and it will generate a relatively brief summary of everything discussed, which will be added directly to Samsung Notes. So, as you can see, we already find several fascinating elements here in Gemini that are perfectly integrated with Samsung applications. Let's say that this would be one of the key differences compared to Gemini on devices from other brands, where they might not be able to interact so seamlessly with the system applications. But if you're coming from iPhone and you didn't know about Gemini, well, I'll tell you a little bit more that it's an artificial intelligence assistant that you can converse with quite simply. But you can even share the screen and chat about whatever you're watching. Let me give you an example. In this case, I paused listening to Gemini, but I'm going to resume it and then I'm going to chat with Gemini. Do you think this charger is compatible with the Galaxy Z Fold7? To be certain, could you please send me a picture of the charger specifications? I'd like to check the voltage and amperage details to ensure they match with your Galaxy Z Fold7. Alright, let me take a look over here to see if it displays the output specifications. Let's take a look. How does it appear? Perfect, I noticed that the charger has an output of 5 bar, third 5, bar tray, and V bar tray. Your Galaxy Z Fold7 supports fast charging up to W. This charger meets the specifications, so it should work without any problem. Is there anything else you need to know? Have you heard anything about this brand? Do you think it is reliable? It can be challenging to determine the quality of a charger just by its brand name alone. Some generic chargers can be quite good, while others might end up damaging your phone. Would you like me to find more information about that particular brand for you? Yes, please let me know when it was established or any important details. I understand. Just give me a moment while I search for that information. Could you please tell me the brand name? I assumed you could see it since you were looking at my screen. You're right. I apologize for any confusion. I see that the brand name is Vorago. I wasn't able to find much detailed information about the company's history, but it appears they specialize in electronics and computer accessories. No. That's not the brand name. I think you might not be looking at it correctly. You're absolutely correct. The mark is indeed Texan. No, that's not correct. No, neither of those are right. It's not that brand. I don't think you're seeing it correctly. Are you just making it up or what are you doing? Because I'm showing you the product here and you should be able to see my screen. 1,000 apologies. You're right. The brand is STF Mobile. It's a Mexican company. It's not that brand. No. You're doing a very poor job. Besides, you're not. Quiet, Silencio. No, unfortunately, that's too bad. Well, in theory, it is supposed to be an assistant designed to help you. But in practice, things can sometimes turn out a bit differently. You might find yourself in a situation where you're arguing or fighting with the AI, but at least you'll have someone to interact with. Besides the ability to share the screen, let me remind you that you also have the option to share the camera. This way, you can show yourself or display an object if needed. For instance, let's go ahead and try doing this. Hi there. Could you please tell me if this power bank is from a reputable brand? Yes, Ugreen is indeed a well-known brand, and it generally has a solid reputation for the quality of its electronic products. Is there anything else you would like to know about the power bank? Do you think it will be compatible with my Galaxy Z Fold7? Well, the Galaxy Z Fold7 supports fast charging up to 100 watts. This Ugreen power bank also supports 100% watt fast charging, so it should work perfectly with your device. Would you like me to assist you in checking the precise specifications listed in the manual? No, it's all good done. Seems like it worked better with the camera than sharing the screen, but hey, this was just a brief demonstration of Gemini's capabilities. Available on all Android devices, though integrated nicely with Samsung's apps on the Galaxy. Although in addition to Gemini, Samsung has its own voice assistant called Bixby, which is still installed and available. But Samsung seems to have given it some less spotlight. Although, if you want to use it, yes, it's definitely available. I would recommend it a bit more for controlling system-related things because it is far better integrated into the entire Galaxy ecosystem. Even though Gemini makes a good effort at integration, if you're using a lot of Samsung products, it will probably work better with Bixby. By the way, another great AI feature is that you can search for images just by using text. For example, here you type what you are looking for. I'm going to type, for example, tree, and let's see if it's able to show me. And there it is. As you notice, it filters out all the images where it notices that there's a tree and it's going to show us the picture. I'm gonna write now sky, blue skies, and watch. Here he found this video that shows directly the sky. So you can search in a much more natural way the pictures that you have on your device. Additionally, you know that you also have the circle to search feature, which allows you to hold down at the bottom and activate this Google interface. This interface can recognize songs playing in your surroundings. However, you can also lock onto a product to try searching for it online, and similar kinds of things. In fact, with this very same gesture, you could also translate the contents of the screen or select any type of text. Even though you naturally cannot select it, with Circle to Search, that option becomes available to you. This is another feature that Google has developed, and it is available on many Android devices, which means it is not exclusive to just this one device. Let's describe the software features for the foldable format. Notice in screen settings, you can choose its behavior. The cell phone, when you fold or unfold the screen, has a new feature. Here, you will find an option that lets us scroll upwards to keep the screen active. For instance, take note that if I'm browsing through the gallery, perhaps viewing a screenshot, and I close the phone, there is now an option to scroll up so I can continue doing what I was engaged in. In the past, there was an option available to you where you could just simply... The device would previously turn off after performing this action, requiring you to unlock it, access the home screen, and then open the recent apps list to continue what you were doing. Now, it is much more convenient. You also have the option to always keep the app on the external screen, although I personally don't favor it too much. I prefer this intermediate option, which wasn't available in earlier generations. In fact, we were talking about it in the review because it is a feature that is present in other foldables, and now Samsung has already incorporated it, and that is excellent news. In this case, there are some options only available when you are using the screen, and internal aspects like the zoom setting, which enables us to utilize this multiple view option. This allows us to make use of the side space to have columns. Additionally, here you can adjust the zoom setting directly on the screen. With less zoom, more content fits onto the screen. And I want to remind you that in this particular case, other applications could also benefit from this extra space. For instance, if you are using Spotify, it might display a sidebar for you. Additionally, we are going to observe that in the case of Gmail, a separate view appears, allowing you to see both the mail you are currently viewing and the complete list of your emails. For example, WhatsApp will also appear in this format. So, being a foldable device, it makes excellent use of the available space. Clearly, there would be other applications that might not be as well optimized. However, we are seeing a growing number of them that are, such as Instagram, which even displays a small navigation bar on the left here to make better use of space. The same applies to Facebook, so we're seeing more and more apps that are efficiently optimized. For instance, the gallery here is also going to demonstrate these features. The clock is also designed in a way that makes it function exceptionally well. One more unique feature when the device is in use is the taskbar, which you can fully customize by turning it off or on according to your preference. It's important to note that you have the option to set it to automatically hide or keep it always visible. If you choose to hide it, keep in mind that it will be floating and will have a slightly larger appearance effect. If you keep it on screen, the icons are smaller, but this taskbar lets you open apps more easily. It also shows recent apps for faster switching. I can show up to 4 recent apps, but if the startup dock is too full, some apps won't show. Note, it shows up to 4 recent apps for quick switching. And in addition to that, you have the ability to drag these applications to various positions on your screen. You can choose to move them to the bottom half, the top half, the left half, the right half, or even the center. This allows you to open apps in different multitasking modes. By doing so, you gain a great deal more versatility while using your phone. Therefore, the taskbar proves to be quite useful, as it allows you to easily open any other application from this location. You can also use whichever app you prefer, and with similar behavior, you can press and hold to open it in a split screen mode along with other features. Now take note that when you have the device in a landscape format, there are some applications that will open in a portrait format. However, if you go into the lab's experimental features, there is an option for a forced landscape view. This means that, for instance, we can choose TikTok, and in this particular case, it will be compelled to run in this landscape mode. You won't need to rotate the cellular sensor or do anything like that, which provides you with a really excellent experience that other foldable devices do not offer. So, these kinds of little details make Samsung software really enjoyable on these foldables. In fact, I forgot to tell you about another small detail, and that is that Samsung not only allows us to have 2 applications open at the same time, but we can even add a 3rd application. For example, in this case, I'm going to select Facebook and note that we can split any of the other 2 areas of the screen. So, we are able to have a maximum of 3 apps running here simultaneously. In addition to this, there's also the option to drag the icons to the center in order to continue opening apps in a floating window mode. This makes multitasking truly spectacular. Furthermore, if you combine it with good luck and utilize one of its main modules, you can adjust the windows to appear less zoomed in. This way, you can achieve an even wider view, and the icons won't appear so large. So here, for instance, we have a window, and it functions quite effectively. Remember that in a different separate video, I demonstrate how to install Good Lock and all the additional features that you can access through this assistant. And of course, if you frequently use a large combination of applications continuously, you can click on its divider to add this combination of applications as favorites, whether it's to the edge panels, to the home screen, or even to the same taskbar. Let's add this to the home screen, allowing you to see how, with just one tap, we can swiftly open these 3 apps. Now, it's important to highlight a significant absence in this foldable device. It no longer supports the S Pen. This feature was a major advantage of the previous foldables. However, it has been one of the compromises Samsung had to make in order to achieve a thinner device. Personally, if I were an active user of the S Pen on the Galaxy Z Fold7, which has been my personal device of choice, I really miss having that option quite a bit. I would definitely love to see Samsung include the S Pen again. However, considering how thin this device is, I truly believe it's a worthwhile sacrifice. Yet, it is indeed a significant disappointment not to have an S Pen available here. But let's continue talking about some of the benefits of having such a large screen, as Samsung takes advantage of it quite well. For example, when editing a photo with Galaxy, notice that if we select an object that is not in the picture, we can see the difference. We are now going to remove, and we will also provide you with a split view feature. This allows you to see both the before and after images simultaneously. Unlike previous generations, where you could only view one image at a time, now you have the option to show the original. This way, you can directly compare the differences side by side. You will also observe that certain menus, particularly in Samsung's web browser, which are related to artificial intelligence, are going to adjust and modify their content accordingly. To avoid covering the screen and to make the most out of the space of this large display, and naturally I had already demonstrated in the camera section how the camera adjusts its interface when you perform this action of entering flex mode. However, The camera is not the only application that is well adapted for this. In fact, Samsung has done a great job adapting most of its applications for this purpose. For example, in the gallery, see how the content is at the top and controls are at the bottom with a touch panel to browse photos. So it's absolutely fine, and it's actually something we don't typically observe in other foldables. For instance, when you look at the calendar view, you'll notice that it fits much better. Here to not just view the entire month, and even begin browsing from the bottom to see today's schedule or the schedule of any other day you wish to explore. This demonstrates how Samsung optimizes more. This is a far superior operating system, unlike other foldable phones that simply have software resembling a traditional cell phone with a stretched screen. In the past, the calculator would adjust its interface due to the different display sizes, but now it maintains the same size in both flex mode and full screen mode. However, for instance, you'll notice that when I access the unit converter, if I do this action, it will display the numbers at the bottom and the conversions contained at the top. So as you can see, Samsung firmly insists that it adapts perfectly well. Its operating system, and this includes even the calculator. Something I really love about Samsung is that in third-party apps, like in this case Spotify, you can see that it doesn't always adapt correctly. However, Samsung does something very clever by adding an option to force the view with a floating button. And notice that in multimedia applications, Samsung also adds the playback controls for a full experience, even though the developers have not enabled that option. So the same thing will happen, for example, in YouTube Music, where you notice that even though it makes good use of the space on the screen, if we fold the cell phone, it is not going to adapt. But here, this floating button appears and ready. We are already going to have the controls here as well. In Samsung's browser, we'll notice we can repeat the same action to show the additional panel. And the difference here is that we are not going to discover multimedia controls, yet we find a touch panel that, as you can see, enables a cursor on the screen. This cursor allows us to interact with the page elements and navigate through them. Here, we also have, I insist, other brands' foldables lack these screen interaction features. Samsung excels here, providing a more professional experience. When it comes to foldable devices, Samsung definitely gains an advantage here because it offers a significantly more professional and enhanced interaction. For YouTube, you'll notice it auto-adapts its interface. Some buttons appear, some exclusive to YouTube Premium, but overall, the truth is it takes advantage of the screen benefit. I'd like to hide the status bar to use more space, but that's not available. In full screen, it still shows the status bar. I think that would be a good addition for a future update. In the case of Netflix, note that it will also react the interface to adapt the content of the screen, although it does not show any element in the control area, but at least if it adapts the display area. In the case of Disney Plus, it happens exactly the same as with Netflix. It adapts to the viewing area, although it does not show us a control area at the bottom, but I think it does give you some. It feels really nice when you can watch series or movies without needing to use a stand to hold your device. Or if you need to recharge your phone using something extra, and given that the majority of movies are produced in the 21:9 format, the reality is that this part of the screen is used quite efficiently. For the case of Amazon Prime, for example, note that it does not adapt automatically, and that is a disadvantage, however. Samsung, again through their good software, manages to adapt it well. Believe me, this is a drawback that other manufacturers fail to solve, but with Samsung, fortunately, if it is available. Notice that here we can select which apps we want to force this on. For example, I'll select Prime Video. Notice how this action automatically forces the panel with controls at the bottom. They're also going to dim a bit, so they're not distracting you or anything while you're watching movies. This feature really needs to be highlighted as one of its strongest points. I must insist on this because I have tried many other foldable devices from various brands, where the interface simply does not adapt and fails to take full advantage of the fact that they can be used in this flex mode. So with any other streaming application that does not automatically adapt, you should know that you have the option to force it to adapt using these selectors. Notice how other video call apps adapt too. With Zoom, controls move to the bottom and the top is just the viewing area. It seems simple, but trust me, other foldables don't do it. The same applies to Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. Clearly, Samsung is still the leader in foldable software. Now let's talk about security, since in this case it integrates a lateral fingerprint reader. The position is fine, even though having a reader embedded in the screen would give it a more modern appearance, and would be nice to have. I'm actually not complaining about this feature. However, what I will complain about is the fact that it only supports a maximum of 4 registrations, when most devices support a maximum of 5 enrollments. So, Here you are a bit more limited in terms of the versatility of the number of people you can trust to register their fingerprint, or if you like to register several of your fingers to unlock in different positions. In this case, it includes facial recognition, but it's only two-dimensional, so it's not very secure. Regarding other functions, we will find Samsung Wallet, interestingly, has incorporated Samsung Pass. Here, you can securely store a backup of your passwords and other sensitive content, protected by your fingerprint or pattern. In this instance, you can directly fill text fields using Samsung's keyboard to access these confidential notes. The truth is that it works quite well both as a password manager and as a manager of any other content you consider private that has to do with text. Of course, we will also find the secure folder, where we can store other content such as images, videos, and even applications. And this secure folder, you already know that you can customize it to change the icon or the name in the list of applications. Samsung additionally offers a feature they refer to as the automatic blocker, which is particularly beneficial for users who may be inexperienced. This feature will automatically limit the variety of system functions to make it harder for someone to attack you. Advanced users might need to disable it sometimes, but I like its higher security. Remember, Samsung has Knox Matrix Trust Chain Tech, offers chip-level security, making device breaches tough. Samsung also provides you the capability to encrypt your backup data or any data synchronized with your account, which helps in preventing anyone from intercepting it. Interestingly, it even has a feature that allows you to store all your blockchain transactions. This means you can either create your own wallet or connect it to a third-party wallet and keep everything securely on your phone. Additionally, it offers a feature known as Secure Wi-Fi, which is essentially a private VPN service provided by Samsung. It provides you with 1 GB each month at no cost, or you have the option to pay for limitless protection. This feature is particularly helpful when you're connected to public Wi-Fi networks. It integrates smoothly into the operating system, especially if you are using Samsung's web browser. Additionally, it offers tracker protection, which blocks various elements to stop advertisers from gaining complete knowledge about you. Moreover, the device is equipped with the dual mesh function, so you can clone two messaging apps to have two accounts of the same app, and it also lets you create a separate contact list. In this particular case, you are unable to clone every application, but you can only clone the messaging ones. Additionally, it includes Samsung Kids, which allows you to tailor which applications will be accessible when you hand this cell phone to children. Obviously, parents can add or remove applications based on their preferences and the permissions they wish to grant. Furthermore, you can also adjust the screen time settings. The device can be configured either to set a specific time limit or a designated bedtime, ensuring that once this time is reached, the device will no longer permit its use. This feature helps manage usage effectively. In fact, you could also add permissions for contacts or multimedia content that the child will be able to access. It would be interesting that Samsung integrates bad posture alerts, light filters on the screen, and similar things, because other manufacturers have seen that have been gradually improving their kids mode, and Samsung has not made major changes in this function for a while. If you happen to lose your cell phone, Samsung has its own network to find devices. Even if you don't have an internet connection, if there's a Galaxy phone nearby, you might still have a better chance of locating it. However, in such a scenario, it's crucial to ensure all the necessary options are enabled, especially if you're planning to send your phone in for repair. There's also a maintenance mode available to lock all the contents on your cell phone. Lastly, Samsung's version of digital wellness is distinct from other Android devices, which typically use Google's implementation. It's quite similar, however, the aesthetics are fully integrated. With one UI, you have the ability to view user statistics for every app, even by category. This lets you see which apps are taking up the most of your time. In this manner, you can establish screen time goals or set timers for each app to help prevent becoming addicted to your cell phone. You can even create specific restrictions. It works in the web browser or Galaxy Store with great tools. And all of this comes on top of the suite of options that have been developed by Google for ensuring the security of all Android devices. So, in the description, I'll leave you a video where I talk about the rest of the features. It might be important to highlight the extended unlock feature, which allows you to keep your phone unlocked in secure places and environments. However, there are many more additional features that you can learn about with that video I'll leave in the description. Let's talk now about the battery, which is 4,400 mAh. In this sense, there has not been an evolution compared to the last generation. But at least I think it is important to note that although the device is much lighter and much thinner, it maintains the same battery capacity. But let's go to the test trying to download the device as fast as possible. It reached 4 hours with 38 minutes. For reference, the last generation hit 4 hours and 8 minutes, so here we had half an hour more with a very demanding consumption. So even though the battery did not increase in capacity, it seems that it has increased the autonomy of the cell phone, although in my background. Drain test, when the device was folded, it reached 6 hours with 44, which is not so bad if you compare it with other devices with batteries of even 5,000 mAh. But if you compare it with the last generation, if we see a little less optimization, because the Galaxy Z Fold6 lasted 8 hours and 10 minutes in this test with the device. Deployed and attempting to drain the battery rapidly, it lasted 3 hours and 46 minutes. In this case, there was only 12 minutes difference with respect to the last generation. But if it came to give us more duration and in the background test reached 5 hours with 40 minutes, i.e. 22 minutes less than the last generation, so the behavior is quite curious. In some tests lasts longer than the last generation. In other tests, it lasts less than the previous generation, so it will greatly depend on what type of user you are, as battery life relies on your daily, but playing YouTube videos with the screen brightness at 50%, the device managed to achieve a total of 15 hours and 24 minutes using the external screen. Honestly, it fell a bit short during this YouTube video playback test. Furthermore, when considering the device in its deployed state, it reached 13 hours and 7 minutes with the same test. Therefore, we can conclude that in extremely demanding activities, the device, it generally performs quite well. However, when it comes to more everyday, routine, and casual activities, I feel that the device does not manage to deliver an exceptionally outstanding battery life or anything particularly remarkable like that. The battery is definitely going to be one of its weakest aspects, and you will surely find yourself needing to use the battery saving mode quite frequently. In certain situations, you may even have to activate an additional option that will turn on an ultra saving mode. This mode will restrict even more functions on the cell phone, specifically designed for emergency situations. Given that the battery life isn't very strong, there will undoubtedly be times when you will need to rely on it. Additionally, consider that it supports 25 watts charging. This is another area where the device is lacking significantly and falls behind when compared to its competitors. Moreover, the charger is not included in the box. However, with just 15 minutes of charging in this instance, it reached up to 27%. Notice how during almost the first half hour, it maintains a consistent power level, extremely close to the maximum level that the charger supports, which is beneficial. In just 30 minutes, it reached up to 55% of the battery. Samsung defines fast charging as having more than half of the battery charged in 30 minutes, and in that regard, they meet the standard. However, it's clear that the charging power decreases afterward to avoid putting too much stress on the battery. The full charge was completed in 1 hour and 19 minutes, so interestingly in my test, it charged slower than the Galaxy Z Fold6, but hey, this can vary from test to test depending on the environment and other factors, but overall, it doesn't claim to be fast. Luckily, it supports wireless charging at 15 watts with good power, though it lacks direct magnets. Charging on the phone doesn't make sense, but I try a magnetic case. Magnetic chargers. However, in my opinion, this feature should be integrated directly into the body of the cell phone, especially for a device lacking support for the S Pen. Moreover, it includes reverse wireless charging, which allows you to charge accessories on the back of the phone. Yet, in this scenario, it is limited to headphones only, because the latest Samsung watches do not even permit wireless charging on the back of their phones. Therefore, I find it increasingly difficult to see the usefulness of this option. Lastly, in this section for health, the battery in this case includes adaptive protection mode for smart charging, reaching up to 80% overnight, and then wait until you are almost ready to wake up to complete the remaining 20%, which helps prevent the battery from deteriorating too quickly. Additionally, you could lock the charge at a specific percentage, which can be beneficial if you need to keep the device plugged in continuously to the present. In this sense, it complies perfectly, but neither in battery life nor in charging power will be something very outstanding. For connectivity, if we find something outstanding, it supports G networks with a feature to block mobile data use in specific apps, avoiding surprises. It also supports Wi-Fi 7 networks for faster speed, very high download speed. And of course, you can add an eSIM to have a mobile data plan simply by scanning QR codes without having to buy a physical SIM card. Especially useful when traveling, although when you use an eSIM, you will have to deactivate one of the 2 SIM cards you have available physically. It also includes Bluetooth 5.4 with excellent stability. It also features NFC for mobile payments with your phone or connecting to accessories with similar tags. As a high-end device, it lacks FM radio. However, it offers wireless screen projection with Smart View, allowing you to mirror the screen, project a specific app, certain multimedia content, or even project with the screen off. The projection is quite advanced and also supports wired projection with HDMI adapters, since it does have MHL, although in this case it will only be in mirrored format. But it works well. The good thing is that it also offers Samsung DX mode, available in both wireless and wired options, so when connected to an external display, you can use this device, almost like it's practically a computer, since you'll have window management with an interface that's very similar to what you would find on a laptop. However, it obviously still runs only Android apps. At least it provides you with a little bit more versatility in terms of using multiple apps simultaneously. If you have a wireless mouse and keyboard, you greatly increase your productivity. Of course, it must be mentioned that with One UI 8, Samsung DX has undergone significant changes, with some options being eliminated and others reorganized. To begin with, the DeX lock button has been removed, which seems quite unusual. So, if you suddenly need to lock your screen, you must do so by using a physical keyboard command, specifically Command-Shift-L. If you don't have a physical keyboard, I haven't been able to find any other option to lock the screen. Plus, it doesn't allow taskbar customization. For example, you can't add and hide some additional indicators to customize the keyboard experience, among others. It also doesn't allow you to make the taskbar hide automatically. But what I find even more serious is that if, for example, you put YouTube or some other application in full screen, both the taskbar and the title bar are still present, making the experience not full screen, and that is quite annoying. The button that allows you to pin the icons of applications you're currently running is also missing. However, you do have the option to drag them manually to the left dock to pin them. It appears that some of the versatility has been taken away. Additionally, there's no way to disable the pointer from scrolling between the connected screen and your phone screen. In the settings, you will decide if your phone will be positioned on the right, left, top, or bottom of the screen. When the cursor moves beyond these boundaries, it can then start to appear on the phone screen. That's quite good. However, previously, you could disable this option. In this scenario, if you don't want to use your cell phone as an additional screen and the cursor crosses that boundary, your phone screen will activate right away. This can be somewhat irritating unless your phone is in touch panel mode at that particular moment when the boundary is restricted. Therefore, I find the behavior a little peculiar. Hopefully, all this will be updated to optimize it, as it has changed significantly. Another detail is that you have a limit of 5 applications to open in this format. And previously, with GoodLock's multi-star module, you could eliminate that limit. At the moment, it is not feasible because this option is missing from this particular GoodLock module. Furthermore, you won't have the ability to maximize applications by scrolling them upward to the top. However, it still maintains the split screen functionality if you move them to either the left or right edge of the screen. You could also maximize applications by double tapping on their title bar, but the option that allowed you to maximize by scrolling applications up has been removed. And another curious detail is that the applications on the home screen appear organized in the center at the bottom, and now you do not have an option to make the applications are sorted alphabetically or have an automatic alignment to the upper left corner, which is what one is used to on computers. So as you realize, there are several options that have disappeared. Although now the configuration is better integrated throughout the system, the DeX menu vanished. The DX menu is now distributed between the connected screen options and others that are present in the respective menus, such as sound or keyboard. But if you were very used to the DX menu, you will notice a lot of changes. Your Samsung DX experience has many changes. Additionally, it can be connected to Android Auto either wirelessly or via cable without any issues. By the way, its USB port is 3.2 Gen 1, which allows for a very fast transfer speed. Finally, in this section regarding sensors, we will find an accelerometer, a geomagnetic field sensor, an orientation sensor, a gyroscope, a pressure sensor, and a proximity sensor. This proximity sensor appears to be physical, as it seems from tests that it is not a bothersome virtual sensor. We even tested it during calls, and it performs well. We already know that Samsung's ecosystem is one of its strongest points, not only because it has a very good catalog of products such as Galaxy Buds, Galaxy Watch, Galaxy Ring, Galaxy Tab, even the Galaxy Smart Tag, but also because we will find very good interaction technologies between all its devices, Although personally I still insist that Samsung should distribute the Galaxy Book in Mexico, but it is a product that is not sold in our region. Anyway, you have the option to use Quick Share for transferring files between various devices. It's important to remember that Quick Share can also be installed on Windows laptops, allowing you to share files easily between different devices. To move files to your laptop even if it isn't a Galaxy, it also has a feature called Music Share that will allow us to share some Bluetooth devices with some friends. We can also connect our Galaxy Buds and it will automatically switch over when needed. Galaxy Buds can auto-switch between devices, even the same one. Time on our tablet and cell phone, and it will switch automatically when we get calls. We have the ability to answer calls directly from other Galaxy devices, such as our watch or our tablet. Additionally, there is a feature that allows us to continue using applications on different devices. For instance, if we are studying with Samsung Notes on our phone and then switch to the tablet, we can seamlessly pick up right where we left off. This same functionality applies in the web browser. We'll also have a shared clipboard to copy content here and paste it on our tablet. I think this is one of the functions why I need Samsung to distribute the Galaxy Book also in Mexico, because I think it would be a much more complete ecosystem if we also had this kind of options on the computer, because it also offers us camera continuity. That is, we could use the cell phone camera as a webcam on the computer, so you have quite a few interaction technologies. Here is available this camera sharing setting that you this. Commenting. We also discovered the option to share storage, which seems interesting. It allows us to explore the contents of our cell phone from the computer wirelessly, as if we were connecting a USB stick. However, the Galaxy Book isn't available for sale in Mexico, so many of these features are somewhat underutilized. Fortunately, it does include this connection section with Windows pre-installed, ensuring that even if your laptop isn't Samsung, you can still use certain kitchen functions. But here you depend a little more on the technologies developed by Microsoft. Samsung also incorporates a multi-control function, enabling you to share your cursor seamlessly across your computer, cell phone, and tablet. However, the ecosystem feels incomplete without the Galaxy Book available in Mexico. Additionally, you'll discover technologies like Samsung DX, which I've already mentioned, offering a highly advanced interaction. Furthermore, I've discussed Smart View, and you'll find the entire lineup of Samsung watches as well. Samsung SmartThings, like in this example, Samsung, can also provide its own services. In this instance, it doesn't rely on Google Home like most Android manufacturers do. However, it's important to note that it will present you with the entire catalog of your home devices. Naturally, you'll need to configure it step by step as you acquire more products. But what's particularly intriguing here, it's Samsung does have great catalog of compatible devices with partners and alliances to integrate into your home. Intelligent with identical controls, and actually it is already compatible with the Matter standard. Therefore, in the near future, as more products are released under this standard, we will have the opportunity to integrate them more effectively into our Samsung SmartThings application. Here, for example, I have available my air conditioner, some lights, including smart tags for tracking vehicles or pets, as well as washing machines, dryers, and a variety of other products, all linked to your cell phone. Samsung's ecosystem, therefore, extends far beyond just mobile devices. It also integrates with home appliances. Additionally, Samsung provides its own app store, which can offer you various benefits, optimized applications, and even promotions or freebies. Thus, it's definitely worth exploring to see what more you can gain. It is not merely a store centered solely on spam like some other manufacturers' stores might be. Instead, we will also discover Samsung's very own health platform, which is called Samsung Health. This is where we can access all the content collected from Samsung watches and various other Samsung accessories, such as the Galaxy Ring. This allows you to maintain comprehensive oversight of your entire health status within a single application. Furthermore, you can even connect certain products from other brands here as well. 100% is not limited solely to Samsung. This fact demonstrates how Samsung maintains an open ecosystem. It allows connections with Health Connect, which is Google's platform. Furthermore, it can connect with other applications that you have installed, provided they are compatible. It even synchronizes with third-party services to gather all the information. Additionally, Samsung has developed its own platform. Samsung Wallet doesn't fully rely on Google Wallet. In Mexico, Samsung Wallet still doesn't allow card payments, but you can add coupons, boarding passes, and other items for quick access. It would be fantastic if it could let us add payment cards. But unfortunately, that feature is not available in Mexico at the moment. We hope that in the future, Samsung will keep improving its ecosystem to include such options. Additionally, Samsung provides its TV service, which is identical to what is available on their televisions for accessing free streaming content. However, for some reason, it is currently not functioning in this instance. And ultimately, in this particular situation, Samsung provides an option to partner with OneDrive. So when you are in the gallery, you will observe that it will suggest you link your account with OneDrive. It's quite interesting that you are unable to directly connect your account with Google Photos directly from the gallery. But, well, we already know that you could perfectly well open also the Google Photos app that comes installed here. Personally, I would love Samsung to offer its own cloud service, but, well, bet on alliances with some other partners. Let's test the performance of Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold7 by opening 16 applications. In this case, it is a device that has the Snapdragon 8 Elite 4 Galaxy, a super powerful processor and also 12 GB of RAM and ready. In this case, it took 1.4 seconds to open each application on average. A simply brutal performance. But next, let's see how TAL manages the 12 GB of RAM it has, which should be very good. But let's see why. Previously, Samsung showed a lot of white screens when we were switching between multiple applications. In this case, it seems that the white screens have disappeared, although some applications could reload their content when returning to them. But I think it is nothing strange. It seems that Samsung has finally managed to optimize its system well. To effectively utilize RAM, notice, here it appears that the content has been refreshed slightly, but it doesn't seem to have fully reloaded the application like it used to do in the past, with several white screens appearing. Here, it appears that Samsung has truly invested significant effort into enhancing both the experience and performance. Let's observe how it performs with all those applications open, and as we select some filters that demand considerable graphic power. The truth is, it performs exceptionally well. It doesn't seem to slow down at any point. It appears that if you manage to sustain an exceptionally high level of performance, even when applying these kinds of effects, which on other devices might become somewhat more complicated than anticipated, you can achieve remarkable results. Now, with all those apps open, we're going to begin scrolling within each of the apps. And you can observe that the device doesn't appear to freeze at any moment. It only pauses when it's loading additional content, and you might have to wait a bit, but that's perfectly normal. Overall, I believe it generally maintains a pretty smooth experience. Now, let's head over to X to do precisely the same task, and you'll notice that the performance remains just as consistent. As you can see for yourself, it appears to perform exceptionally well. So I don't believe there are any drawbacks to the level of performance it can achieve. Having this device in foldable form factor provides us with excellent power and performance. The design is not only innovative, but also enhances the functionality significantly, making it a highly efficient tool for various tasks. Interestingly, here we see how. Additionally, RAM management is going to provide us with the functionality of RAM. Additionally, I've discovered that it automatically includes an extra 8 GB of virtual RAM. When it comes to storage, I own the 256 GB version, which is the most basic option available. However, there is also a 512 GB version and even a 1 TB option. I would definitely advise against purchasing the 256 GB version because with a device boasting these features, you're likely to accumulate a significant number of pictures, many files, and with lots of data, 256 GB might be insufficient. Unfortunately, you won't be able to insert a micro SD card or anything similar into it, so you'll have to rely entirely on the 100% cloud storage or consider purchasing a version with more storage space. Fortunately, in this instance, I believe it comes with a very efficient and good file manager that allows you to delete large files, for example, a bit more easily. It also enables you to scan some other backup content, although it doesn't provide you with similar image scanning capabilities. We don't have duplicate files or similar issues seen on other devices. I believe that the storage management might not quite measure up to other operating systems. However, for those who are more technically inclined, let's proceed with this storage speed test. Here, we can observe 4,169 megabytes per second in reading, which is an impressively fast speed, and 3,406 megabytes per second in writing. This certainly shows that it possesses excellent capabilities. However, let's proceed to a real-life test. For this, we will utilize LumaFusion, even though. Consider that these are HDR videos, so it is an even greater degree of difficulty, since LumaFusion is an editor that does have capabilities to maintain the HDR characteristics of the videos, so it is already working. I remind you that they are videos recorded with this cell phone in 4K joined one after another, which have a total duration of 1 minute, but look at the tremendous power it has. It took 15 seconds even with these videos. In HDR with 4K resolution, the reality is that the experience of working with complex videos will be absolutely intense and impressive. Additionally, keep in mind that LumaFusion has been brought to Android by Samsung. Therefore, it is better optimized for these Galaxy devices. It makes excellent use of the available space because it offers various viewing options. For instance, we can choose a different view to more effectively arrange all the elements. When it comes to games, we will discover the gaming hub available, providing us access to games that we can play without needing to install them, which is perfect if we are casual gamers and prefer not to use up too much storage space. However, we will also have the ability to manage all the content we have already installed. Furthermore, in the Game Booster settings, we will have the option to choose the default performance profile specifically for games. For each game, you can adjust this individually. You can choose if the screen runs at 120 Hz or 60 Hz, depending on if you prefer smooth movements or better battery life. You could also choose to pause charging, so the power supply pass directly to the cellular components instead of going through the battery, which helps to avoid heating. It could be helpful, but only if you have a power delivery charger connected. We're also going to find the way in which the shortcuts are displayed, as well as reordering each of them. And you can also go ahead and add the floating app shortcuts that we'll get to in a moment. By default, if you go 3 minutes without playing, the screen is going to dim, but you can change it over here. And we're also going to be able to enable power saving when it's in that dimming mode. It also allows you to select the settings for screenshots, among other things. But let's open a game so you can see for yourself how the shortcuts appear, since in this case there is a small bar that we can slide in this part. And with this, we find some tools, for example, touch optimizer that is going to make the screen have a little faster response. Additionally, we provide this feature that dims the entire screen when the game is downloading content, which helps in conserving battery life significantly. Moreover, you will find the option to take a screenshot or record the screen, and also the ability to lock the panels and the screen, to prevent accidental activations and to block the automatic brightness along with Bixby. However, as you can see, there aren't as many tools available as we find in some other devices, which offer us, for example, interactions with the volume buttons, among many other tools that are available in other phones. Samsung software lacks in gaming. We can open an app in floating mode. What for? To be able to answer a message or something like that without leaving our game? But I insist, there are not so many tools to improve the gaming experience in Call of Duty. By default, it has the graphic quality very high at the maximum rate. Consider that we can go up to the maximum graphic quality, but if we go up to the ultra rate, the quality drops to the medium level. This is the same thing that happens in all high-end devices today. It should be noted is good compatibility with the additional effects that come in this game so that the visual experience is very good. In this case, as usual, first we gave priority to execute it with the best possible graphics quality. All the contents are run from the internal screen. However, I believe it's better to run these types of games on the external screen, because the internal screen's shape is quite square. Therefore, you don't get much of a horizontal viewing angle, which is crucial in these games. But when speaking specifically about the performance, he notes that it is expected to be excellent. We are going to observe a very good performance along with very good stability, although the temperature will be a bit higher than we would have preferred in this first game. However, when holding the device with the USB-C port located on the right side, the processor area does not come into contact with your hands, which helps you not to notice the heating as much. But if you play in this manner, you will end up covering the speakers. Therefore, it appears that the overall experience with the device, especially regarding gaming, might not be as positive or satisfying as one would hope. There are still some aspects that need improvement to enhance the gaming experience significantly. Displayed, but well, then we gave priority to the refresh rate and notes that in this case it achieved 120 frames per second on average. Once more, with excellent stability, the low peak was just at 117 frames per second. The temperature is again higher than we would prefer, yet it does not become too noticeable when playing with the device deployed. The truth is that it has performed quite well, and the heating issue is somewhat understandable since it is an ultra-thin device when playing PUBG. It's important to note that you have the option to either achieve an extremely high frame rate while maintaining balanced graphics quality, or you can opt for an Ultra HDR quality at an ultra frame rate. In fact, when you select the graphics on the fluid setting, you have the capability to reach an ultra extreme level on the refresh rate. Therefore, by prioritizing the refresh rate, it's worth noting that the device was able to deliver a 120 frames per second, which provides incredibly smooth gameplay that is certainly noticeable in this content. If it maintains a temperature that is still controlled, although the graphics were quite simple, it is still not capable of running an extremely fluid game with more advanced graphics. In this situation, as a user, you must prioritize either the graphic quality or the fluidity, because in this content, you cannot enjoy both simultaneously. Next, we played Asphalt. It's important to note that for this test, we configured the content to run at 120 frames per second and increased the graphics quality to the maximum level. Interestingly, in this scenario, it wasn't able to achieve 120 frames per second. In fact, when looking at the graph, observe how you can notice it gradually decreases the frames and eventually stabilizes at 60 frames per second. I find it quite odd, considering the price, that this content cannot operate at 120 frames per second. Gamers will naturally desire a superior experience. It's not much more than this, but for casual players like me, it's plenty for a good experience. We then proceeded to play Sendless Zone Zero. It's important to mention that we chose the highest possible graphics quality settings to really challenge this device with a complex test. Additionally, we increased the frame rate to 60 frames per second to evaluate if it could handle all these settings effectively. As you can see, it appears to have started off quite well. However, towards the final part, it experienced a slight struggle with some low peaks, which may not be too noticeable but were slightly perceptible. Overall, it has also managed to maintain a very good gaming experience in these contents, while still keeping the temperature relatively controlled. This is quite remarkable, especially when you consider that by this point we have already run several different contents. The device has been operating at a relatively low temperature throughout, which is really quite remarkable when you think about it, given that we have already run multiple contents and the device has been consistently running at a low temperature. Somehow it hasn't had too much of a break, so the performance has actually been quite good. Then we played Genshin Impact, which is set to high graphics by default, but for testing we maxed everything to very high. We increased it to 60 frames per second to test its capabilities, and the experience was good. It even stayed cooler. I believe this device can run the content at 90 frames per second or more, but developers didn't adapt it to fully utilize Android's capabilities. What we must express is that the overall experience will be exceptionally positive, providing a very cool and refreshing sensation throughout. There are virtually no low peaks, which means there's not much else to mention, except that it will be quite a smooth experience when running this content. After that, we played Guttering Waves, which is one of the most complex games we've encountered. It's important to note that we reached up to 60 frames per second, with all settings maximized. However, we also enabled the automatic frames per second option, and as you can observe in the graph, the frames per second begin to decrease. Yet, even without recording the screen, it still maintains a smooth and good feel. Yet, capturing the screen, however, if it has undergone excessive strain, it falls significantly short of our expectations for this price range, and it also operates at a notably high temperature. It's quite evident that this device is not entirely directed towards those who seek an extremely advanced gaming experience while simultaneously recording gameplays and similar activities. It doesn't fully cater to those needs. For very demanding users, it won't suffice. For these games, don't record the screen or use simpler graphics quality, as it may suffer greatly. Then, we went ahead and played Bright Memory. In this instance, it was set to 120 frames per second. We also turned on several options to push it to the highest level of difficulty. With this setup, we confirmed that it is not really a device meant for gamers. You can clearly notice how poorly the button distribution is on a square screen. All the buttons are positioned above the screen, which looks quite unattractive. Moreover, when we recorded the screen again, the performance was significantly reduced. Fortunately, without screen recording, it did reach a high peak of 90 and a low peak of 34. The display does fluctuate noticeably, but the experience is still good. However, when recording the screen, it does get more complicated. If you compare it with the excellent performance, in this very game that has given us the Galaxy S25 Ultra, it becomes quite evident that this device is not specifically designed for the most demanding gamers. Despite the fact that it features a very large screen, there are certain types of content where it will be necessary to make use of the external screen. This allows you to better adapt the buttons and provides a greater field of view along the horizontal axis, enhancing the overall experience. So, if you are not recording gameplays, I believe the experience will remain quite acceptable for you. However, if you do record gameplays, you should really consider looking for something that is dedicated entirely 100% to gamers. In conclusion, when asked my opinion about the Galaxy Z Fold7, I believe Samsung's design progress with this device has been remarkable. It's the world's thinnest foldable, ultra-light, and even thinner and lighter than many traditional devices, which is impressive considering it has a massive 8-inch screen. Clearly, the main sacrifice is the S Pen. If, like me, you used it, you'll miss it. Many didn't use the S Pen, so the debate on its necessity continues. Samsung made a risky choice, but the benefit is its ultra-thin design. The screen is fine, sound is great, but cameras might disappoint. Especially the front camera, I think it's pretty bad, and in the rear cameras, I think it's average. In the nights especially, I think it should improve. Samsung has several generations without improving night photography, and especially the light sources come out very overexposed. In addition to the telephoto camera, remains unchanged after many generations, and is already perceived very old. The photography really is very disappointing, especially for the price you are paying. If you are truly passionate about photography, this device will likely not satisfy your requirements. The camera it has is only suitable for capturing images in a pinch, but these pictures may not be ones you'll truly appreciate. Fortunately, it does perform well when it comes to video recording, although it still lacks in the zoom department. Additionally, the battery life might be somewhat disappointing for some users. We don't see improvements in our tests. It didn't perform as well as hoped. Samsung devices with smaller batteries perform better, but not this one. Plus, the 25 watts load makes battery life low. You'll need to charge it often and it charges slowly, but the software compensates. It's a completely brutal software. Very good, full of options, tons of customization, top software, and also the performance is brutal except for gaming, but if you are a specific type of gamer, there will be better options available. My video review, which is over 2 hours long, is already up if you want to explore it in depth. But anyway, this is how far we've come with this extensive video review, and I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you watched the entire thing, please let me know in the comments, because it is truly amazing that you watched the whole video, which is over 2 hours long. Thank you very much for sticking with us this far. I truly hope you enjoyed this content, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.